Good morning and welcome to the July 2012 meeting of the Commission. Welcome all. Madam Secretary, would you please announce our agenda today?
Mr. Chairman, good morning to you and good morning, Commissioners. For today's agenda, you will hear 4 presentations from various Commission officials and staff. First, the Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau will deliver a presentation on the June 29th through 30th derecho storm, which caused significant communication outages that impacted millions, and the Commission's response. Second, you will hear a progress report by the Wireless Telecommunications Bureau and the Office of Engineering and Technology on the development and use of white space technology to unleash more spectrum for wireless broadband. Third, you will hear a presentation on the latest advancements in mapping at the Commission, including the launch of FCC.gov maps and novel use of maps and the latest open source mapping technology to increase transparency across the agency and promote data-driven decision-making to benefit consumers, industry, and developers. Last, you will hear the Measuring Broadband America July 2012 report, which extends the study into more regions and publishes more kinds of data. This latest study of broadband performance in the U.S. follows the Commission's first-of-its-kind report last year to test and report transparent broadband speed and performance data in collaboration with Internet service providers. This is your agenda for today. David Turetsky, Chief of the Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau, will introduce the first presentation.
Thank you. Mr. Turetsky, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairman and Commissioners. Today I will be providing you with an overview and an update on the Bureau's response to the June 29, 2012 derecho storm in the central, mid-Atlantic, and northeastern United States. Sitting here with me today from the Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau are Jeff Goldthorpe, Associate Bureau Chief, and on the end, John Healy, Associate Division Chief of the Cybersecurity and Communications Reliability Division. On June 29th, a fast-moving and extremely severe weather system called the derecho, which few of us had heard of before, dramatically affected wide swaths of the United States. The derecho caused billions of dollars in physical damage along its path, beginning in the Midwest and continuing through the Mid-Atlantic and northeastern regions of the country. Millions of Americans lost electrical power during and after the storm for periods ranging from a few hours to over a week during a heat wave. For communications networks, there is good news and bad news. The good news is that in many areas, communication services held up very well. And in most areas where they did not, restoration of service proceeded apace. But that was not nearly the case everywhere. Communication services generally, whether wireless or wireline, over broadband or otherwise, degraded and experienced outages. Some 911 facilities were hit especially hard. From isolated breakdowns in Ohio, Kentucky, Indiana, and Pennsylvania to systemic failures in Northern Virginia and the state of West Virginia, a significant number of public safety answering points, or PSAPs, couldn't receive and properly dispatch E911 calls at all. Once some connectivity was restored, many PSAPs were partially down for several days. The seriousness and impact of these PSAP outages and impairments is illustrated clearly by what happened throughout much of Northern Virginia. In Fairfax County, for example, these failures affected both primary and backup 911 systems. The result was that the PSAP serving most of the 1.1 million people of Fairfax County couldn't receive any 911 calls for several hours. Even after arrangements for rerouting 911 calls finally were made, 911 service was significantly degraded for days. The state of West Virginia experienced serious problems, with even more PSAPs knocked out of service completely than in Northern Virginia. From the moment the storm hit and throughout the period the public felt its impact on communications, the Bureau went into action, monitoring, reporting, and responding. We coordinated closely with FEMA and constantly communicated with service providers and other stakeholders. Utilizing the Commission's Operations Center, staffed 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and supplementing it with direct outreach and pre-established reporting protocols, the Commission obtained important information about communications outages from the storm, including 911 services. Some of our most valuable, though non-public, information sources were reports made by communications companies to the Commission's network outage reporting systems called NORS and to the Commission's voluntary disaster information reporting system called DERS. Some specific actions the Commission took include granting an emergency special temporary authority, or STA, so that a utility company could use certain frequencies to assist with power restoration in Ohio on Saturday, and issuing on the Commission's website and via social media a set of consumer tips for communicating during an emergency. Although local, state, and regional governmental entities are primarily responsible for supporting and operating E911 services and providing first responders, only the FCC spans the full path of the storm with communications expertise, statutory responsibilities, and public visibility. Moreover, Congress has given the Commission authority to ensure that communications networks, including those that offer interconnected voice over IP service, promote the, quote, safety of life and property, close quote. To advance this mission, immediately after the impacts of the derecho on communications and 911 services dissipated, the Bureau began an inquiry. Our focus is to learn all the facts and circumstances of the outages and disruptions in service, including the causes. This not only includes the PSAPs, but also cell sites, interconnection switches, and other facilities that prevented consumers from using wireless and wired and broadband communications to reach emergency providers at a time when consumers were more likely than ever to need to do so. Our goal is simple: to use this information to make people safer. We want to enhance public safety by applying the lessons learned to help make communications more reliable and resilient and reduce the chances that this will be repeated. As part of this effort, the Bureau began a series of meetings, which are ongoing, with stakeholders, including communications services providers, public safety officials, and others. We are also assessing and evaluating the information received or still coming through NORS and DERS. We have been in touch with and will coordinate as appropriate with state and local governments. Finally, the Bureau is also looking at what we can do better. That includes whether we can improve the process of obtaining information through NORS and DERS, how we use the information internally, and whether we can communicate better in emergencies with the public and with our partners, federal and otherwise. Just yesterday, we expanded our inquiry to seek comment from a broader set of stakeholders, including the public, and invited comment on how to make communications and emergency services more resilient everywhere. We look forward to providing you with further updates as we continue our inquiry, as we did in the days following the storm. Thank you.
Well, thank you. We appreciate your hard work, your lack of sleep, and your focus on this. Let me ask my colleagues if there are any comments. Commissioner McDowell?
Yes, first of all, Mr. Chairman, thank you very much for your leadership on this, and Chief Turetsky, you as well, and all the dedicated folks in the Bureau and throughout the agency have been working very hard on this. The public probably doesn't know, but we do have a 24/7 operation under your tutelage, and we really do appreciate everything you do there. This June 29th derecho, I guess, David, when you first started this job, if you spoke Spanish, derecho was not affiliated with any sort of weather phenomenon that we knew of, and this is just a few weeks ago, your first day on the job. So now I guess all of us know this new meaning of the word derecho, which, by the way, in Spanish can mean straight ahead or to the right. So for non-native speakers such as myself, it can be very confusing when you're getting directions in Spanish. Do you mean straight ahead or to the right? But in any case, we now know it as a lethal weather system. And I want to thank you for gathering information through many avenues, including yesterday's public notice. I also do want to acknowledge and thank the communications companies and the public safety officials that have been working with the Bureau in connection with this examination. The past few weeks have no doubt been a trying time, and we are grateful for everyone's assistance. but it has been an especially trying time for tens of thousands of our fellow citizens in the wake of the storm. The scope and the damage caused by the derecho was simply overwhelming in some circumstances. Most alarmingly, press accounts tell us that upwards of 2.5 million people in the greater Washington, D.C. area were without access to 911 services during this very significant natural disaster. The exact cause or causes of these outages remain a mystery, and of course that is unacceptable, but you're on it. We must do all that we can to ensure that such a wide-scale outage never happens again. Not only must we be prepared for unforeseen natural phenomena, but being the capital of the United States, we must be prepared for potential terrorist attacks as well. And having a hardened and reliable 911 system is absolutely crucial to the public interest. Hopefully, the events surrounding the derecho can serve as a wake-up call for government and industry alike. The storm or storms were incredibly powerful and destructive, but the silver lining in those clouds is that they may have exposed fundamental weaknesses in our public safety systems that we can now start strengthening. And as we now know, as you outlined, Northern Virginia, where it was particularly hard hit, and at one point Verizon reported that its field forces were responding to about 130 down poles. I'm sure that number's gone up since the last time I looked, and 762 down copper or fiber cables in the region that were just Verizon's. So their technicians and countless others were working around the clock to restore these critical services. Although it may be impossible to fully prepare for and anticipate any event that may occur in the future, it is important for government and the private sector to make the time to study what went wrong, but also what went right. Let's not forget about that as well, and to assemble these lessons learned. And by doing so, we can and will make the public safer and better prepared for the next event. So I look forward to working with all interested parties on this. I think it's very wise and prudent to put out that public notice as well. And whatever we can do to help in my office, please let me know. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Clyburn.
Thank you, Chief Turetsky, for that presentation and for releasing a public notice which seeks additional information about the communications outages that occurred during last month's derecho. While the FCC already receives information about service outages through our mandatory network outage reporting system and voluntary disaster information reporting system, given the extent of the outages last month, it is appropriate to learn more about the impact of the storm on emergency and 911 communications networks. I also appreciate that the public notice asks questions related to whether next-generation 911 tools and technologies could have improved the reliability of communications networks. Once your staff has received the record, I look forward to a report on what they've learned. Thank you.
Commissioner Clyburn, thank you. Commissioner Rosenworcel.
Last week, at the oversight hearing before the House of Representatives Energy and Commerce Committee, I called for the Commission to begin an investigation into the communications difficulties that followed in the wake of last month's storm in the Washington region and beyond. As we all know, weather-related power outages brought life here to a halt. Wireless towers and 911 service failed too many of us. I believed then and believe now that the agency has a duty to search out the facts wherever they may lead. Then we can apply the lessons we learn and make our networks more resilient, more secure, and more safe. This week, I visited the 911 center in Fairfax County, one of the public safety answering points that was not able to answer emergency calls. The head of Fairfax County's Department of Public Safety Communications described an eerie quiet in the aftermath of the storm, as the calls into 911 quickly and implausibly ceased. This put lives at danger, it put our safety at risk, and it deserves our attention. So I am pleased that the Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau has provided this update today. I am also pleased that the agency has begun an inquiry into what happened and why. And finally, I am confident that the Bureau, and with its new chief at its helm, will get to the bottom of this situation so we can learn from it and be better prepared when disaster next strikes. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Pai.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chief Turetsky and my colleagues have thoroughly described the scope of the damage wrought by the June 29th derecho storm, and I agree with their assessment that the storm exposed a very serious set of issues that deserves the Commission's attention. And to that end, I commend the Chairman and the Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau for launching this inquiry into the causes of the outages and the resiliency and reliability of 911 networks in fulfillment of our responsibilities, as Chief Teresky mentioned, under Section 1 of the Communications Act. It is my hope that the Commission will quickly finalize its fact-finding mission and identify the lessons to be learned so that our nation's communications system can better withstand any future emergencies. Finally, I'd like to add that I would like to thank the broadcasters for the critical role that they played in relaying information to those impacted by the storm. When electrical power, cell sites, and broadband networks went offline, battery-powered radios served as a lifeline, connecting many of us to the outside world. And for that, I and a number of other citizens in the Washington area are grateful. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Pai. And let me begin by offering my condolences to the many people who suffered as a result of the recent deadly storm and its impact. And let me add my thanks to you, David, and your team. Welcome to the job. I think it was within a week of your first day, and when I came and visited you in the Ops Center and your team, there hadn't been much sleep, but there was a real commitment to make sure that the FCC played its role in getting information, coordinating with FEMA, coordinating with state and local officials during the storm itself. And then, of course, immediately after the storm hit, the FCC, thanks to your leadership, began working to assess the damage to our communications infrastructure, coordinating with FEMA and others, as I said, and recognizing the important issues raised by the storm and its effects. We immediately launched an inquiry into the storm's effects on communications in the Midwest and the Mid-Atlantic to find out exactly what happened, what went wrong, and what can be done to ensure that we have reliable communications during future emergencies, particularly emergency communications. This work is so important because, as the derecho reminds us, communications networks are an essential part of our everyday lives. Wired and wireless, fixed and mobile, telephone and broadband, they're how we connect to friends and family, how we get news and information, how we conduct commerce every day, and how we seek help in an emergency. All of these forms of communications were essential during the derecho. With mobile phones, some people who lost power could nonetheless call for help, check on friends and family, or search the web or use Twitter and other social media to find information on where to find shelter, food, cooling stations, and more. Radios, as we've heard, also played an important role when power goes out. It's really mobile phones and radio that can continue to provide information because they have batteries. You could plug them into your car. But as the Bureau's presentation made clear, for all that went right with communications, the people who were able to communicate through different forms of communication, the lives that were saved because of the different forms of redundant communications that we now have in this country, for all that went right, too much went wrong. More than 4 million people lost power during the storm, many for days. And the storm made abundantly clear how much of our everyday communications now rely on our electric grid. There were also outages at cell sites, making it difficult for some people to use even their mobile phones. And a significant number, as we've heard, of 911 systems and services were partially or completely down for several days. This obviously is unacceptable. In Prince William County, Virginia, someone called 911 to report a man suffering a cardiac arrest during the storm and got a busy signal. Now, that person fortunately finally got help. He tracked down authorities on a non-emergency line. But that can't be the way it works. And I'm glad that we have begun immediately the investigation into what went wrong and what we can do about it, because the derecho made clear the absolutely vital role of our communications networks, particularly during emergencies. That's why you launched the inquiry immediately. I'm pleased that as part of that effort, you've already been gathering the facts from the communications companies, from local public safety officials, sharing information in two ways with FEMA. And then, of course, yesterday we announced that we're expanding our derecho investigation to seek public input from a broad set of stakeholders across the country on other outages and on how to make our emergency and other communications more reliable and resilient everywhere. We want to learn from this specific incident to make sure that across the country we minimize the chances that it happens again. And we'll also be looking as part of this inquiry into other outages that have occurred other places in the country to learn lessons that we can learn. David, as you know, we had a meeting yesterday with some public safety officials, and our expectation is that there are some common threads, and there will be measures that we can take to improve our reliability profile when it comes to emergency communications networks and beyond. Of course, the investigation and the public notice will inform our ongoing efforts on the reliability and continuity of communications network, including mobile and broadband technologies, as well as our ongoing rulemaking to improve our outage reporting to make sure we get the info we need on all forms of communications outages, including VoIP and broadband, so that we can help protect public safety. We've also been working hard, as many of you know, on accelerating next generation 911, as well as text to 911. Recent events confirm the importance of that work. Commissioner Clyburn mentioned this, and I agree. The good news about next generation 911 is that it may bring with it more redundant and reliable infrastructure. The challenge is we need to figure out how to invest in existing infrastructure, even as the infrastructure will be changing over time, so that we don't have these kinds of outages in the future. This is a tough challenge. But these initiatives and the action items that will come out of our current inquiry will help make the American people safer, more secure, and I'm looking forward to working with all of my colleagues and all stakeholders on this vital set of issues. So thanks again to you and to Jeffrey and to John and to everyone in the Public Safety and Homeland Security Bureau. I know you're also coordinating with other parts of the agency, the Wireless Bureau, the Media Bureau, General Counsel's Office, OET, like so many things that we do. When there's something important that happens, it generally tends to span multiple bureau and offices, and I do want to thank everyone for responding immediately and working together effectively to make sure that the Commission does its job. Thank you. And with that, Madam Secretary, please announce our next presentation.
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, next, the Office of Engineering and Technology and the Wireless Telecommunications Bureau will deliver a progress report on the development and use of white space technology to unleash more spectrum for wireless broadband.
Terrific. Mr. Knapp, Mr. Leibovitz, the floor is collectively yours.
Okay. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Wireless Telecommunications Bureau and the Office of Engineering and Technology are pleased, or maybe even excited, to make this presentation on white spaces and spectrum sharing for wireless broadband. I'm not sure if the slides are on their way. Our presentation today will cover three main topics. The first is spectrum use today, both for licensed and unlicensed services and devices. The second is emerging approaches to spectrum sharing, a topic that's getting more and more attention. And the third is the progress that we've made to date on technology to provide access to unused spectrum or white spaces and the future of directions for this important technology. So let's start with spectrum use today. Until recently, licensed services and unlicensed devices existed in almost separate worlds. Cell phones operated exclusively over the licensed cellular network, and home wireless networks provided broadband connectivity at homes and offices, operating exclusively over spectrum available for unlicensed devices. In the past few years, these two worlds have intersected, and today they go together like peanut butter and jelly. Access to unlicensed spectrum has sparked a broad diversity of uses, such as broadband, sensors, RFID, baby monitors, a topic that's particularly important to some of us, cordless phones, and vehicular radars, to name just a few. And today's smartphones include unlicensed devices such as Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, near-field communications is coming online that support electronic commerce. So you have devices with a plethora of radios with all kinds of different unlicensed services on them. Some estimate that 30 to 40% of internet traffic makes its way at some point over Wi-Fi, freeing us from Ethernet cables and reducing congestion on wireless networks, and also offering consumers more performance at lower cost. Unlicensed has provided enormous economic value through the creation of new industries and products, and it's perhaps the poster child for sharing, for spectrum sharing. These devices operate throughout much of the spectrum on a non-interfering basis with other licensed services, and they've thrived. Turning to licensed spectrum, this has also obviously been an enormous success story in communications. There are approximately 2 million FCC licenses in our database, licensing database. And licensed services offer a diverse array of services, including broadband, broadcast, point-to-point, satellite, and many, many other important telecommunication services. The commercial wireless industry alone, which depends on licensed spectrum, is at least $150 billion industry and growing. The wireless industry has particularly benefited from our flexible use policy, enabling it to move rapidly from one generation of technology to the next at the speed of technology rather than at the speed of regulation. For all the rapid changes in technology and increased demands for access to the spectrum in the 21st century, our spectrum management policies still have a 20th century aspect to them. Spectrum is carved into blocks, with each radio service allocated into particular blocks, and this can sometimes be a siloed approach. Silos can result in inefficient use. Imagine how inefficient our highways would be if every type of vehicle could only operate on a particular lane, or if our air traffic control system required every plane to take a different flight path. This would not be the most efficient way to have roads or air travel. So with that in mind, we're increasingly thinking about ways to share the spectrum using new technologies, and that's the next topic we're going to discuss. Just to put it in context, historically our basic strategy has been to clear spectrum and to allocate it. This is a strategy that has delivered enormous benefits to America, and spectrum reallocations will continue to be a key component of our overall spectrum strategy as we go forward. But where the reallocation of spectrum may not be practical, we also have to consider opportunities for spectrum sharing. And before we get into that, it's useful to put it in context with other kinds of sharing, since I think people sometimes confuse different concepts here. Sharing can happen at several different levels across what you might call the radio stack. You can have different users sharing a single radio system, and this is what happens with our wireless service providers. They have networks where tens of millions of users efficiently share a single or multiple spectrum bands using advanced technologies like CDMA, LTE, and others. You can also have different networks using different spectrum, sharing many of the same network elements. Virtually all wireless operators in the U.S. today share towers, and we're starting to see more and more cases where people are sharing some of the more active elements in networks. People call this active sharing or radio access network sharing. And finally, you can have entirely different radios using the same spectrum. A good example of this would be a fixed microwave system sharing with a satellite, which is a pretty common case. This is pure spectrum sharing, and that's the kind of concept that we want to focus on for the rest of the discussion. Much of the spectrum is, in fact, already shared using a variety of approaches. Spectrum is typically shared in terms of frequency, space, time, agreements to accept interference, or sharing, like we mentioned before, sharing of infrastructure. But this sharing is generally static. It doesn't adjust to rapid changes in the use of spectrum, and this, we think, creates an opportunity to share more. The techniques for sharing spectrum have been growing in sophistication through the use of spread spectrum, including frequency hopping and coexistence based on robust technology. So, for example, the LTE technology, as Julie will explain, is more interference tolerant than some of the previous generations. Geographic techniques have evolved to provide wide area licenses with exclusion zones where operation is not permitted, and so this allows spatial sharing. And then modern sharing technologies such as white spaces, which we'll discuss in a moment, they all use these basic techniques, which are sort of time-honored, but they do it in a much more dynamic way.
So one example of increased sharing is to use a coexistence overlay. For example, wireless technologies such as LTE are designed to tolerate some interference and still provide an acceptable level of performance. We're exploring whether this approach might be used to share spectrum with federal systems in the federal spectrum at 1755 to 1850 megahertz. And in fact, tests are being planned, and today, wireless carriers, equipment manufacturers, and the NTIA and commission staff are all gathered at Idaho National Labs to consider whether that might be a suitable place to conduct these tests. A second example are small cells, which would share spectrum geographically. They could operate on either a licensed or an unlicensed basis, much as the femtocells and the Wi-Fi offload work today. Dense networks of small cells could greatly increase the capacity of these networks. And a side benefit of small cells is that the short range enables the capacity to be targeted to the specific spots where that capacity is needed. Small cells could be deployed on a standalone basis or could be combined with cognitive radio if necessary to avoid interference. Another example is dynamic frequency selection, or DFS. It's a technique that was developed to enable access to additional spectrum for unlicensed devices in the 5 gigahertz band. The radars that operate on an allocated primary basis there only operate at certain times or at particular locations. The devices are designed so if they detect a radar, they can shift to another frequency that will not interfere with the radars. The Commission recently provided spectrum for medical body area networks based on coordination and the capability of the devices to detect and avoid flight testing and other radio signals. So we'll talk a little bit about the progress we've made on white spaces. The white space paradigm is relatively new. It enables access to spectrum that may be unused at any given location or particular time. The basic idea is to identify the white space. The device or the network then adapts to use that free space, a technique that we often refer to as dynamic spectrum access. And then the device has to meet certain technical standards to protect those existing services against harmful interference. The Commission first implemented this approach in the TV bands with rules finalized in September 2010 and modified slightly this past April. So here's how it works in the TV spectrum. Several TV channels are vacant at any given location, which creates the white space. The device determines its location, communicates with a database of the protected services. The database replies with permissible frequencies at that location, and then the device automatically adjusts to operate on the permissible frequencies. The services that are protected in the database include digital TV, analog Class A, low-power TV stations, translator and booster stations, wireless microphones, cable head ends, and land mobile systems. So you can tell by the number of services that need to be protected that it's not simple, but it's worth the effort. The U.S. leads the world in white space technology. We've adopted final rules. We've approved the first devices. We've approved the first database managers. We've approved initial tests under experimental licenses. We've approved the first commercial deployments and are in the process of beta testing the database so that you can register wireless microphones. And that's really the last step that needs to be completed to enable people to deploy white space devices virtually anywhere in the country. So we're close to completing the final step in the process. Our lead has been followed in many parts of the world with trials and demos in Cambridge, UK, Japan, Singapore, South Korea, Uruguay, Brazil, China, India, Africa, and that's not all of them. We anticipate that the initial products and deployments will focus on fixed applications such as broadband to schools. And in fact, there was an announcement by AirU recently about a program to bring broadband to rural colleges using white space technology. Will also be used for machine-to-machine communications, broadband services by the wireless internet service providers, and various services that are needed by municipalities, such as were demonstrated in Wilmington, North Carolina, and soon in Nottoway, Virginia. We expect that we're probably still a couple of years away from seeing whitespace technology in portable devices because the technical challenges there are greater. We have with us today representatives from Spectrum Bridge and Telcordia, whose databases have already been approved, Adaptrum, one of the manufacturers of whitespace devices, and the tables are in the back. I'd encourage you to visit, and they can demonstrate the databases and the products that they have been developing for this space. I should also mention that there are 8 other database managers that have gone through multiple steps in the process. Some of them have told us they're about ready to begin the final stage where they put up their databases for everybody to review and get the final approval. But so that we don't leave anybody out, that's ComSearch, Google, KB Enterprises, LS Telecom, Keybridge, Newstar, WSDB, and Microsoft. And they've told us that they certainly are interested in the whitespace model for the TV bands, but they see a great deal of promise in extending this model, whether it be licensed or unlicensed, to other spectrum. So there are a number of things that we can do to build upon the whitespace and other advanced sharing concepts, and are indeed doing. The Commission's Spectrum Innovation Notice of Inquiry asked how dynamic spectrum access can provide more intensive and efficient use of spectrum, and we're spending time with various players to determine what next steps may be appropriate. The Middle Class Tax Relief Act of 2012 established a roadmap for exploring expansion of the 5 gigahertz Wi-Fi band, and we're working with the NTIA on this project, and there's a report due to Congress this fall. The President's Council of Advisors on Science and Technology, PCAST, is working on a report that will likely encourage a shared spectrum model in federal government spectrum bands. And some of the potential bands where we anticipate exploring advanced sharing concepts include the 1.7 gigahertz band that I mentioned already. There's also a fast-track band of 100 megahertz that NTI identified, and we're contemplating for small cells and perhaps other applications. The 5 gigahertz spectrum, and each will likely require a different approach. We thank you for the opportunity to provide this update, and we'd be happy to answer any questions you may have. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Very important update. And thank you. Commissioner McDowell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Any day that we're talking about white spaces is a happy day for me, as you know. So this has been one of my favorite projects that I've been working on here at the FCC for over 6 years, and that was only that was several years after the formal discussion at the FCC actually started on this. I think formally started in about 2002, and of course lots of other discussions well before that. So, you know, it looks like we're at a point if we have little to no federal spectrum going to auction in the near term. The incentive auctions, as we implement that law, that'll take some time. In the meantime, it's very appropriate for us to talk about imaginative ways to squeeze more efficiency out of the airwaves, or spectral efficiency, and I put spectrum sharing under that umbrella. And as I've talked about before, spectrum sharing, and as you outlined very well, has many different meanings, those that you've outlined, and then also some that we haven't even imagined yet, I think, with technologies that lie over the horizon that will allow for dynamic uses of spectrum. So our discussion today is very appropriate. It's timely. The Commission should be focusing on this now, especially given what we're in right now a little bit with the availability of spectrum. I've been calling it a cul-de-sac. I don't want to call it a dead end because we'll be able to find a way out at some point. And I think technology and innovation will help illuminate the way, and perhaps this crunch time will be the necessity that will provide the motherhood of invention and innovation. So I just want to thank you for your continued terrific thoughts and energy on this. Whatever we can do to help you including getting out of your way perhaps, please let us know. In the meantime, I do hope the federal government will relinquish more spectrum for auction. I'm hopeful. I know we will all be working together on implementing the incentive auction law, and that provides some promise. But we need to do everything we possibly can because this is so vital to the American people and our economy going forward to get this right and to act as quickly as we possibly can. Again, we've been discussing white spaces formally at the FCC for 10 years. You just said it might be another couple of years before we see consumer mobile devices. It's at least that because so much of that is contingent upon what we do with incentive auctions. So it's hard for chip designers to design those chips right now. So thank you very much, and I look forward to actually producing some fruit on this. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Commissioner Clyburn.
Thank you. To Chief Knapp, John Leibovitz, and the staff of OET, thank you for informing us about the progress that the industry is making on implementing operations in the TV white spaces. All of this is great news for those Americans who live in sparsely populated rural areas and low-income urban areas. To date, licensed communications companies have not developed profitable business plans to serve these areas, so the successful development of TV white space databases and devices gives us hope that these underserved communities will be moving closer to enjoying the affordable advanced communication services that the vast majority of Americans already enjoy. I find last month's announcement of the AirU initiative very exciting because we all recognize the fact that universities which are located in certain rural areas are struggling to find access to affordable broadband networks. This challenge often makes it more difficult for these fine institutions to attract the best faculty and students. By employing unlicensed TV white space services, the AirU initiative can offer a low-cost means to provide these universities with increased coverage and capacity. In addition, the initiative will stimulate and aggregate demand in the adjacent community. All of this should encourage greater investment in and development of new services. So I join a host of others in congratulating the New America Foundation, GigU, the United Negro College Fund, Google, Microsoft, and the other founding members of AU for developing such a creative partnership to assist rural universities and promote the development of white space services. Finally, I wish to acknowledge the fact that this announcement also underscores the public interest merits of bipartisan efforts. Representatives Anna Eshoo and Darrell Issa ensured that the Middle Class Tax Relief and Job Creation Act of 2012 contained statutory provisions to protect unlicensed spectrum. I commend Representatives Eshoo and Issa for their leadership on this issue. As the February 2012 letter stated, it is estimated that unlicensed spectrum generates between $16 and $37 billion each year for the U.S. economy. In November of last year, the Consumer Federation of America issued a report which found that Wi-Fi offload resulted in wireless carriers not having to construct 130,000 cell sites. This resulted in an annual cost savings of more than $25 billion. Staff presentations such as this one show that the Commission understands the value of unlicensed spectrum to our economy and that we are committed to encouraging the development of more advanced unlicensed services in the TV white spaces. So for that, I join the others in thanking you.
Thank you, Commissioner Clyburn. Commissioner Rosenworcel.
So, the wireless revolution is here to stay. The number of devices using our airwaves is growing at breathtaking speed. This is more than the proliferation of wireless phones and tablet computers. Consider that within the next decade, machine-to-machine devices communicating wirelessly may number as high as 50 billion. But as with any revolution, the old ways of management will have to give way to the realities of the new world. In the simplest terms, the demand for spectrum is going up. The supply of unencumbered spectrum is going down. This is the pressure point. We must innovate. Innovation, as the presentation here today reminds us, will take many forms. Good spectrum policy involves licensed and unlicensed services. The former provides reliability and interference protection. The latter provides low barriers to entry and low-cost opportunities for creative uses. But what we have done before will not be sufficient in the years to come. The solution, as others have noted, lies in three things: technology, topology, and spectrum. First, technology. New technologies and opportunities for sharing are under development. Geographic and temporal sharing are established notions. But more dynamic technologies need investment from the public and private sector to speed their development on a broader scale. I believe we can lead here, just as we had led the world in developing white spaces technology. Second, topology, or the structure of networks. It is here that small cells hold large promise. They can make more efficient use of existing frequencies. They can help cover geographies that are hard to reach with macro service. But standardization is still underway, backhaul is key, and the agency should be looking for ways to facilitate their use. Third, spectrum. We all know that the President has called for 500 megahertz of spectrum to be cleared for commercial use within 10 years. We are making progress at the Commission, including in our review of how to provide for more flexible use of the 2 gigahertz band currently assigned to mobile satellite service. Plus, we have a series of auctions, including incentive auctions, on the near-term horizon. To bring certainty to the marketplace, I believe we should put these auctions on a clear timeline. But it will take more than all of these efforts to reach our goal. As others have noted, the federal government uses large swaths of choice spectrum. While past efforts to reclaim spectrum from federal users have involved the stick, I think going forward we should explore the carrot. Today, the Commercial Spectrum Enhancement Act provides funding to federal users for relocation when their airwaves are reallocated for commercial use. It also now provides upfront planning money for funding. What is missing is a series of incentives. What if we were able to financially reward federal authorities for efficient use of their spectrum resource? What if they were able to reclaim a portion of the revenue from the subsequent re-auction of their airwaves? Would they make smarter choices about their missions and the resources they need to accomplish them? I believe it's an idea worth exploring. The idea of synthetic currency proposed by the President's Council of Advisors on Science and Technology is also worth exploration. Finally, it is essential to understand why it is so important that we get our new spectrum policies right. Putting our wireless resources to work will grow the economy. By some estimates, every dollar invested in the wireless sector will add $10 to our gross domestic product. This is investment that can create jobs, raise wages, and change the way we live. When it comes to the state of wireless, the issues are challenging, but if we get our policies right, the rewards are real. Thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner Pai.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks to you as well for what I think all of us have recognized as a very intriguing presentation. I think it's clear from our comments and from your presentation that the technological innovation in this area has been of a nature and at a pace that astounds those of us who have been following telecom for these many years. I hate to put one or either of you on the spot, but I do actually have a question, and that is the extent to which you believe that our successful implementation of the incentive auction authority granted to us earlier this year would affect, if at all, the white spaces technology in the TV broadcast spectrum.
You can take it on.
And sorry to put you on the spot.
No, that's fine. First of all, it's one of the many issues that we're first and foremost on our minds as we look at the incentive auctions, and I'm sure that we want to make this win-win for all of the players, both recovering as much spectrum as we can for licensed, recovering spectrum that we can be using for unlicensed. There are parameters in the statute as to potential use of guard bands, which we know we're going to need, that can be made available for unlicensed. There will still be unlicensed base over and above that, but it's one of the key issues that I think we're going to be examining in the planned rulemaking.
Yeah, I think people should look at this as an opportunity for everybody. One of the challenges with white spaces today is that there's unequal amounts everywhere, and with nationwide guard bands and other aspects of the auction, there may be an opportunity to increase not only the technical viability, but also the market viability of the white spaces technology, which would benefit everybody.
Okay. Well, thanks for those responses, and I certainly look forward to working with you and my colleagues on ways to make sure that in our implementation, as the chairman has said, which will happen sooner rather than later, sometime this year, that we take that into account to make sure that we don't, frustrate or impede in any way innovation in this space. I've said before publicly that I believe in an all-of-the-above approach when it comes to spectrum, and that includes unlicensed use and spectrum sharing where appropriate. I also believe that we should try to focus on clearing spectrum rather than sharing it with respect to bands where we can determine that there would be of greater value to consumers from sharing. And that includes, in my mind anyway, the internationally harmonized 1755 band that Chief Knapp identified, in particular the lower 25, but also the spectrum all the way up to 1850. I would note also that, as discussed by Commissioner Rosenworcel last week, the House Energy and Commerce Committee had an oversight hearing, and they recently have established a federal spectrum working group led by, as you know, Representatives Guthrie and Matsui. And I would hope that the Commission and you as well would work with them to try to identify ways to find win-win solutions, as you put it, so that the federal band can be auctioned for commercial use to the extent feasible. Clearing spectrum obviously is never easy, nor is sharing it, but I think these are all keys to solving our spectrum shortage, and I'm eager to get started on that work with the chairman, fellow commissioners, and OET and WTB. So thank you for that presentation, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Well, thank you, and thanks to each of my colleagues for your comments on this, and Julie and John, thank you for along with everything else you're doing, working to make sure that we have the intellectual leadership and spectrum policy that will allow us to continue to lead the world in this area. What a few years ago was a prediction is now a reality. Wireless is a revolution that's changing our economy and changing our way of life. Wireless innovation is driving economic growth and job creation. It's enabling new breakthroughs in areas like healthcare, education, energy, public safety. We could do presentations on each of those. And as you mentioned, Julie, in the last few months, thanks to your work in the Wireless Bureau, we've approved breakthrough, innovative uses of spectrum, really in each of those areas. In this wireless revolution, the U.S. is leading the way after years of watching countries like South Korea and Japan and even Europe make big strides. The U.S. now has regained global leadership in mobile. The U.S. leads the world in 3G subscribers by a wide margin. And even more important for the coming years and more, we're leading the world in deploying 4G LTE at scale. Right now we have in the U.S. 69% of the world's 4G LTE subscribers, making America the global testbed for the development of 4G apps and services. This is tremendously good news. On the infrastructure front, Deloitte has estimated that the rollout of 4G networks in the U.S. Will create 750,000 jobs. That's just the beginning of the benefits we already see in the 3G world. What can happen with this new thing that we call the apps economy, something that didn't exist a few years ago, but of course apps are enabled by mobile broadband. We've gone to, how many apps do we have now across the different platforms? I'm not going to put a number on it. That's what I thought. Close to 1 million, a very large number, with estimates from multiple sources saying that this apps economy, which didn't exist before, has already created 500,000 jobs. Since 2009, the percentage of cell phones globally that are running on American operating systems has increased from 25% to more than 80%. And the usage of apps invented in the USA is growing more and more common around the world, whether it's Twitter or Facebook or Google or Zynga or LinkedIn. We're in an amazing time on the unlicensed side. We continue to lead the world, Julie, in the way that you described in your presentation, the first on white space rules, the first at every milestone. I do appreciate that Commissioner McDowell and others have been pushing this for years. It's a tremendous achievement. We're rolling out Wi-Fi hotspots in the U.S. at a tremendous pace. And also, as you described, we're leading the world in advances on dynamic frequency sharing and making spectrum available for Wi-Fi in the 5 gigahertz band. Now, as Commissioner Rosenworcel and I think all of us have mentioned, this success is creating enormous challenges from a policy perspective because demand for spectrum is increasing exponentially. Most mobile subscribers now have smartphones soon. All mobile subscribers will have smartphones. These devices, many of you have heard me say, they put a demand on spectrum that's exponentially greater than what we had before. Not 10, 20, 40, 50, 100% more, but 24 times more for a smartphone, 140 times more for a tablet. These are presenting incredible new challenges. I would pause and say that these are the kinds of challenges that we want to have. We want to have challenges that are being caused by innovation-induced growing demand. We want that to happen here. It does create tremendous pressure on all stakeholders involved in this, on the FCC and everyone involved, to figure out what the changes are that need to be made. I thought Commissioner Rosenworcel has a good taxonomy in different policy areas to move forward. I would note that American networks right now are running at the highest utilization rate of any in the world. It's both good news and bad news. It reminds us that we really need to move quickly in all these different initiatives. So point one to take away from the presentation, I think, is that greater access to spectrum for broadband is critical to our economy and society. And point two is that the old ways of unleashing spectrum for broadband are not enough. They're still important, but they're not enough. Historically, our basic strategy for freeing up new spectrum for flexible use in mobile broadband has been to clear and reallocate. That's been true on the commercial side and on the government side. It's a strategy that's delivered tremendous benefits for America. We did it most recently with the DTV transition. It's happened a number of times with federal spectrum. It cannot, however, be the only tool going forward. It continues to be an important tool, and we continue to have to identify areas where we can clear and reallocate. But and in fact, we're doing so with our incentive auction plan, which has now become law, which will be another effort, a real policy innovation in how we'll accomplish this, to clear and reallocate for flexible use more spectrum. But as I mentioned, the tool of clearing and reallocating won't be enough. And technology now, as you've explained, has gotten us to a point where we can think about sharing in a way that really wasn't possible before. So I'm pleased that it's something that you raised in your presentation. It's an important area. I think Commissioner Pai mentioned all of the above strategy, which I think we all agree with, and I think I first used that concept some time ago, and I'm pleased that we all agree that there's no silver bullet to the spectrum crunch. There's a lot we have to do. We need to keep moving forward on removing regulatory barriers to flexible use. We need to focus on the infrastructure and make sure that we're removing barriers to the rollout of wireless infrastructure, including very much small cells, tackling the backhaul issues, as some of my colleagues mentioned. And we need to keep thinking about these new policy tools that have sort of grown out of white spaces in other areas, the possibility of doing sharing in addition to looking at clearing. As you know, in the 1755 band, we've received an application for an experimental license to begin testing sharing. You mentioned that our colleagues are in Idaho right now working it through. It is important that we start testing right away. More and more people are looking at the sharing idea as complementary to reallocation, clearing and reallocation, and as presenting enormous opportunities to free up even more spectrum than we previously thought imaginable for commercial use. Historically, as we've heard, the U.S. has led the world in spectrum policy innovation. It's clear now more than ever we need to continue innovating, continuing to lead the world in spectrum policy, and it's only possible because of the work that the Wireless Bureau and OET are doing, you and your colleagues. So thanks to you for that presentation. Inside of it were a whole series of work streams, each of which has tremendous promise. And one of the things we need to do is work to make sure that you have the technical and other resources to pursue them. And I know that's a challenge, and so we'll be working with you on that. Thank you. And now, Madam Secretary, please introduce our next presentation.
Next, the Office of Strategic Planning and Policy will deliver a presentation on the latest advancements in mapping at the Commission, including the launch of FCC.gov Maps and novel use of maps and the latest open source mapping technology.
Terrific. Mike, take your time, but whenever you're ready.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to present next generation mapping here at the FCC. Today we're going to present how we're helping the Commission visualize data for policy, stakeholder engagement, and transparency. When I tell people that I work at the FCC and I'm a geographer, I often get a pause, a head tilt, a little glazed eye look, and I watch them go through the process. He didn't say lawyer. He didn't say economist. He didn't say engineer. And after 4 or 6 seconds, they go, so what do you do? We make maps. We help the Commission visualize its data assets. We take reams of data, organize it in systematic fashions, tie it to real places, and design map products which highlight the variation in that data. It is often only through this process where staff and the public have the first chance to actually visualize the complex nature of what we do and what affects them, their country, their state, their individual locality. Since we launched our FCC.gov/maps last October, we have over 30 published maps on multiple sites, average over 200,000 monthly views, and have had individual maps peak at over 700,000 views. Today we will walk through several examples of how we are doing this. We will highlight how these examples are helping the Commission's efforts for data-driven decisions, increased transparency, and how our approach provides a platform for innovation. In each example, we will present how maps were created, how it helps the Commission do its work better, and how it helps stakeholders and consumers. Internet maps like the ones we make aren't your AAA maps of the past, nor are they simply Google Maps. If you spend a little time on websites like flowingdata.com, you will see dynamic, beautiful designs, all sorts of issues from crime statistics to disease and housing and new cultural norms. We are using this same technology. Well, how do we do this? This first slide is a table of all the geographic areas listed in the upcoming September Mobility Auction Fund. Looking at this table is complicated. We just see a big list of things. As part of the normal staff process, this data was combed over, analyzed, summed, cross-tabbed, poked at, and everything in between. But it wasn't until we made a map of it that the real scope of the auction came to light for the staff and the public. This map shows that full presentation. It shows the over 400,000 unique census blocks in that previous list. When we developed it, it was the first time staff were able to really see the areas which would be included in the auction. It was also the first time we could really visualize the total length of road miles that lack access to broadband wireless coverage. This effort helped the wireless policy team not only visualize which parts of the U.S. were in more need than others, but also decide which road categories were the best alternatives for meeting the objectives in the Mobile Connect America Fund. This next example went live just a couple weeks ago, and I wrote a blog post about it last week. For the first time, I'm proud to say the Commission now offers bidders in spectrum auctions the ability to visualize where their bids are. This map is a demonstration and not an actual bid, but it illustrates what bidders see. Now bidders can upload potentially thousands of U.S. census blocks meeting the Mobile Connect America Fund goals and instantly see a dynamic location of the areas they are bidding on. They can pan and zoom their bidding process, their bidding landscape, and ensure that their bid contains exactly the correct areas they planned on. In our innovative approach, our time to develop this application did not increase the IT budget and was fully functional in only a matter of days. This map shows the output of a model for future broadband deployment. This map is not public yet. The data on this map was submitted by a coalition of providers. It is now, right? It's a good one. It's not submitted by it was submitted by a coalition of providers as part of a formal public comments process in the Commission's ongoing Connect America reforms to bring fixed broadband and to unserved areas across the country. The submission contained a single data file with over 5 million rows, similar to the example I showed earlier. With this map, set to be released soon, staff are now able to visualize and analyze this remarkably complicated landscape and make it available for comment.
Just on this, the point is, I just want to make sure people understand this. This is not what was submitted. What was submitted was
just the rows of
Excel
data.
files
and
rows of data,
right.
and your team was able to turn it into
That's
that
correct.
map.
This model takes into account the location of current broadband and telecom infrastructure as well as the current count of residential and business locations. It depicts the range of total monthly cost for each location and whether each area has broadband currently available. With our ability to visualize this remarkably complicated landscape, we ensure that the policy options about this model are placed in the proper context. In this example, we show how we're overhauling the Commission's obligation to publish information on newly constructed antennas. Here, the goal is providing an opportunity for public comment. We publish the list of proposed antennas with a suite of information about its general location, construction, and the like. Quite honestly, for public comment, this list is not as useful as it could be. Just by looking at this list, I don't know where the tower really is. Is it proposed next to an airport, or might it interfere with some other local concern? So we've added the ability to see each of these towers on a rich base map. Here's what the new map looks like. There it is. We offer fast and beautiful design for visualizing where the new antenna structures are to be built on top of several different base maps. Prior to our effort, the public would have been notified of a new construction proposal with just the latitude and longitude. Now, without any increased cost or technology delays, FCC staff and the public have an interactive map illustrating the physical landscape around proposed towers.
Thank you, Mike. Transparency with the public and our stakeholders has been an important focus for us, and we find that maps can be a very useful way of bringing complex information forward in a digestible, interactive format. Maps allow us to visualize patterns in our data that aren't always apparent when you're looking at a spreadsheet. Working with the National Broadband Map has been a large part of my work at the Commission, and there's truly a wealth of information that is collected and made available through that project. However, sometimes people want to know the answer to a particular question, such as, where is broadband available? I love that question because it makes for an interesting map. The green areas on this map show where broadband is available. Darker greens show areas with fast speeds. This particular map was released as part of the Commission's discussion of its Connect America Fund reforms last fall. Connect America addresses the problem that broadband is not available in large areas of the country, and you can see those areas in orange. The Commission's goal, turn all the orange into green. This is an example of how maps provide transparency to the public, showing where the Commission's policies will be implemented. A map of broadband availability can be very useful in order to highlight areas we are targeting. Consumers can see where they live and how it compares to the rest of the country. It can also allow other organizations to take our data and maps and build additional data elements that are important to them, fostering innovation. The next map shows Connect to Compete, an innovative partnership which provides digital literacy training, high-speed internet service, and computers to families at reduced costs. The colored areas show broadband providers who are participating in the program. Working with the Commission's public-private initiative, we developed this map to help the Commission communicate those areas which would be covered by this unique program. It is useful for consumers to see the broad extent of participating organizations, as well as to see how well their own communities might be covered. The Connect to Compete map was developed because a list of participating organizations alone doesn't let stakeholders visualize where digital literacy training should be focused and where opportunities exist. Our maps show where forward-thinking companies are participating in the solution that will drive our innovation economy forward. All of our maps on FCC.gov/maps have a very useful share feature, which appears on the map's detailed page. This share link allows anyone to freely publish FCC maps on their own website in about the time it takes to copy and paste a link. We have seen terrific interest in this feature, and many websites and news organizations have reported FCC stories using our maps as their visualization tools. New York Times, MSNBC, Politico, Gigom, and others. We find this spirit of sharing a key component of our mapping strategy. We also feel the spirit of transparency starts with the tools we use to create these maps. All of the maps you see today are made with tools that come straight out of the innovation economy. Mapbox, OpenGeo, Stamen Designs, CloudMate, and others make it possible for our next generation mapping platform to be built on cutting-edge open software. By using free and open source mapping tools and FCC's open data, anyone can visualize these data with maps. Next generation mapping decreases our policy time to market through advanced visualization and increases transparency. One final word I would say, next generation mapping isn't about a one-size-fits-all strategy. It's about choosing the right tool for the job.
Thanks, Eric. Our approach has provided an opportunity for exciting new partnerships. We're using open internet standards to provide anyone access to the data and maps we publish. The result is that other organizations can offer our data in ways that further their business process or meet some shared objective, or simply take our data and make it to a whole new level of cool. This map here is from the National Broadband map data. These are advertised download speeds. The bright green area is showing the highest advertised download speeds, and the orange showing the lowest. This map is nice enough, but it again gives us context of the connectivity landscape of which places have higher or lower access. The U.S. Department of Education, however, needed a map for identifying how schools were meeting the challenge of connectivity for the next generation. They needed to plot their locations of their schools on top of this map, a challenging task in the past. This next map meets that challenge. It takes the exact same map you just saw, mashes it against the location of all public primary and secondary schools in the U.S., the blue and the purple dots. The map was created by the Department of Education without any effort from us and minimal effort for them. We just supplied them with the endpoint, the URL of the previous map. They published their schools on top of our map in very short order. Again, no new technology investment was required, just some novel thinking from the Department of Ed. This last example highlights the external value of our innovation in application programming interfaces, or APIs. Nearly 2 years ago, we published an API allowing anyone to look up a U.S. Census block by its location. The U.S. Census Bureau hadn't written their APIs yet, and we needed one. We think that this is a Rosetta Stone of government data, as truckloads of data are keyed with their association to the U.S. Census block, but lack a location to look it up. A designer in San Francisco at Stamen Designs created this website, thistrack.com, by using our block API. This site takes a location you type in and returns to you the U.S. Census demography in a wonderful, easy-to-understand charts and design. Without our API, this would be remarkably difficult. We, of course, don't do this alone. We stand on the shoulders of giants. Most of them are in the back row. Their names are listed here. Our developers, super dedicated, smart folks. We need to recognize their innovation in these products. Thanks much, team. We have planned multiple releases coming up. These advanced visualizations include things like pirate radio actions, maps of the broadcast inspection file, low-power FM landscape, and many more. Our goal is that every issue here at the FCC will have some sort of open, transparent, and beautiful map for policy teams and the public. On behalf of the Office of Strategic Planning, thank you very much.
Thanks. Excellent presentation. Commissioner McDowell?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for that excellent presentation. And I love maps. I'm a bit of a map geek myself, and perhaps that's because my father was an editor for National Geographic magazine and would bring home atlases and maps well before they got circulated to the general public. And every now and then I'd get to tour the cartography section of the Geographic, and it was just fascinating seeing how all that data can be put into a visual format and really help illuminate a lot of concepts that otherwise would not be able to come to life, and also be able to tell us stories in a way that other presentations of data cannot. So you're doing a terrific work there. This does create efficiencies for decision making, for the general public, for policymakers, and all the rest. So I just want to thank you for all your work there, and it does go noticed. In my office, we have several maps as well. I'd have more if my team allowed me to. But I will sort of channel the people of Alaska and Hawaii and remind you that when you show a picture of the United States of America, that there are 50 states, and that Alaska and Hawaii should be shown according to scale, that Alaska is not an island off the coast of California. Keep that in mind. They're two very important states. So remember that as a cartographer. And we need to remember that as policymakers as well. So without further ado, Mr. Chairman, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you. Commissioner Clyburn.
Thank you so very much. Mr. Byrne and Mr. Spry, thank you for this morning's presentation. And to Mr. Byrne, I really appreciate you for taking time out of your busy schedule to tell me more about these amazing initiatives. It was obvious from your enthusiasm during our meeting last week, and of course this morning, how much you enjoy finding novel and surprisingly inexpensive ways, that's very cool, for the FCC to make greater use of the open source dynamic mapping technology. The applications you and your staff developed have already really proven to be a tremendous resource to our staff, in that they used your dynamic maps to structure the agency's approach to reforming the Universal Service Fund. These tools also provide more information to our licensees, the communications bar, and to the public, in that they give us a clearer picture about the impact of our policy initiatives on communities as a whole. It is also exciting to hear about how the Commission is partnering with the Department of Education to provide more accurate information about the broadband services and speeds that are available in our nation's schools. I am looking forward to more great work from you and your team in the future, and I am grateful for the fact that you make maps. And you are correct, novel thinking and approaches are way, way cool. So I wish to join you in expressing my appreciation for your fine team and all of the incredible work you are doing and will continue to do. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Commissioner Rosenworcel.
So much new information and data, but all I can think about is the old adage that a picture is worth 1,000 words. This agency has a treasure trove of data. The challenge is making it useful for consumers, for policymakers, and for business innovators with new ideas about services that can grow our economy and change the way we live. Mapping efforts like these help us delve into this data with purpose. They facilitate good decision making. More than that, they show us at a glance where progress has been made and where there is room for improvement. In addition, by sharing data from the Commission with others, as we have done with the Department of Education, we can swiftly and simply multiply the value of the information we already have on hand. So thank you for this presentation, and thank you to the geographers at the agency for the important work you do.
Thank you. Commissioner Pai.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you both for that interesting presentation. So much of our work, I think, depends on accurate and rich mapping, whether it's broadband deployment throughout the country, high-cost universal service support areas, broadcaster service areas. All of this work requires accurate maps, and I think the antenna registration map that Mr. Byrne outlined and the broadband availability map that Mr. Spry outlined are two great examples of that. It just sort of compiles, as my colleagues have said, data in an understandable way that's open and transparent, not just for us, for the sake of better decision making, but for the public to understand where the marketplace is. And so for that, I thank you very much, and I look forward to seeing all the future product coming from your office.
Thank you. I couldn't be, Michael and Eric, more pleased or prouder of the work that you're doing. I don't think either of you were here on my first day as chairman, but I said that we will use technology and new media to improve overall operations of the FCC, running efficiently, communicating effectively, and opening the agency to participation from everyone affected by the FCC's actions. Your work has helped in a major way to contribute to the goal we laid out of becoming a model for excellence in government. If I could go back a little bit to before you jumped into this, thanks to an incredible team, we've made tremendous progress in a series of ways over the last 3.5 years in using technology to open up the agency and improve its operations. We transformed the Commission's website to promote public engagement through plain language, transparency, and new tech tools to make it easier for all stakeholders to stay informed and conduct business with the agency. In transforming the website, we also built a platform that's capable of many things. One is it's capable of exactly what you're doing, and that was part of the conception for the new website platform when it was built. The platform is also capable of allowing the website to be quickly and efficiently updated, which wasn't true of its predecessor. And so we have ongoing processes in place with FCBA, with consumer groups, with other stakeholders to continue to improve all the different ways that we communicate through the web and new media with the public. The FCC became the first federal agency to add a developers page with open APIs to its website, making public data available in formats that can help entrepreneurs, business entrepreneurs, social entrepreneurs to build innovative applications. We saw some of that in your demonstration. And so making data more accessible has been a big umbrella piece of our strategy to open the agency, better serve the public using modern technology tools. I know you know that we launched a data innovation initiative to modernize and streamline how the FCC collects data, uses data, disseminates data. Your important work is part of that. And we were the first federal agency to create the position of Chief Data Officer to ensure better use of data internally and externally. And I want to thank Greg Ellen for his outstanding work. We've also created a Chief Data Officer position in every bureau and office because we want this kind of thinking not to be something that's off in an office somewhere, but spread throughout the agency so that we're transforming all of the work that the agency does. And to come to this, we also brought in a geographer, a technologically sophisticated geographer who could do the kind of visualization and mapping work that you've so well demonstrated today. The breakthrough with maps, of course, is allowing people to visualize data. I'm really glad that you showed the spreadsheets that are the ways that the Commission has historically had to analyze data, both the staff internally and people externally who wanted to look and comment, and to see what you're able to do with it using open source tech mapping techniques. You pointed to the National Broadband Map, which has been a great example of this. Of course, we developed that together with the NTIA under your leadership. That map identifies what services and what speeds are available in every community in the U.S. Information, of course, very useful to consumers, policymakers, as well as businesses and entrepreneurs. That's, along with almost everything you showed, the first of its kind. It's also just the beginning, and it holds tremendous promise. You know, one of the things that we talk about, as you know, in our meetings, is how all these things are in beta, and none of these things are rolled out with the view that we're done. They're all intended for input from the public, further development, constant improvement, both as we learn better how to use the data and the maps and other things in our work, and also as we get more input from the public. Some of the things that mapping is allowing us to do at the agency, thanks to your work, it's improving decision-making at the agency. Your presentation showed different examples of how it facilitates efficient, smart decision-making on things like Universal Service Reform, Connect America Fund, Mobility Fund. Mike, that I've personally found the maps to be very useful, both when they show up on paper, and I appreciated that you put the maps on my iPad, so I'm never away from them. Second, as we've heard from some of my colleagues, these tools are very useful to consumers and other members of the public. I mentioned the National Broadband Map as an example of something that consumers can see and through visualization get very useful information. And of course, it's not we don't do this just because it's nice to see this information. We do it because we believe that this kind of transparency can empower consumers, promote competition, and promote the most effective way of improving services, lowering costs, and driving ongoing investment and innovation. And on the innovation point, you mentioned this in your presentation. I wanted to highlight it because it's very important. What you have done with the team that you mentioned is build a platform for innovation that others can build on. This is very important, whether it's developers at startup companies, developers who are in the social innovation space, in the public interest space, all of the above, by simply taking data that we already had anyway, that was indisputably public data, and making it available as APIs, making the maps available. We've created a platform for innovation that, as you pointed out in your presentation, is actually starting to lead to real innovations. It's a very good, a very important thing, and reflects the vision that you and Greg and others have had about what the agency can accomplish, even with just the assets that it already has. And you've been innovative in thinking about how to bring other developers in. We had a developer day last year that attracted over 550 participants as an experiment and seeing what people could come up with using our data. We're going to continue to do that. Just a couple of other points. The approach that we have been talking about here is the same basic approach that is outlined by the new federal government-wide digital strategy, putting data first so that the public can have access to the same data and visualizations that we do in this agency and that other agencies are moving toward. I want to mention that this may not entirely be a surprise, since the federal digital strategy was developed and announced by Steve Van Rokel, who is now the Chief Information Officer of the United States, and of course until recently was Managing Director here at the FCC, where we had the benefit of his work and his vision leading to the kinds of things that we've been talking about today. So it goes without saying that we enthusiastically join in this administration-wide effort, and we take pride in knowing that we are on the leading edge of this kind of use of data and tools to better do our work and inform the public. So I, too, didn't think when I got this job that one of the most important hires we would make would be a geographer. And yet here we are, and it's a very exciting thing for the agency. I think your work inspires staff throughout the agency. And I've seen the work that both you, Mike, and Eric do with people around the agency who didn't start the year with the knowledge and ability to look at their data in different ways. And I know more and more staff around the agency is coming to you and say, hey, I have all this data. Can we work together? It's a very exciting thing. Thanks very much to you. I want to acknowledge all of the people you listed in your presentation. Hello in the back row. Your work is very important, and we all appreciate it very much. Thank you. And with that, please, Madam Secretary, I believe we have one more presentation.
Finally, today you will hear a presentation on the Measuring Broadband America July 2012 report.
Terrific. Whenever you're ready. I don't know who has the floor, but whoever has the floor, it's yours. Daniel. Good.
Hi. I'm going to start. Slides. Ready for the slides? There we go. Hi, I'm Daniel Kirshner, and I'm the Office of General Counsel. We are here today to present the July 2012 Measuring Broadband America report. This report contains the most recent results from the Federal Communication Commission's Measuring Broadband America program, an ongoing, rigorous, nationwide performance study of residential broadband performance in the United States. The study involves actual performance tests for thousands of subscribers of Internet service providers serving well over 80% of the residential market. Our initial Measuring Broadband America report, released in August 2011, presented the first broad-scale study of actual home broadband performance. The Measuring Broadband America program developed out of a recommendation by the National Broadband Plan to improve the availability of information for consumers about their broadband service. This report provides extensive data about the actual performance of participating broadband providers. It focuses primarily on comparing actual performance to advertised performance to ensure that consumers are getting accurate information when they sign up for broadband service. In addition to the report, we are providing to the public extensive additional service performance data that will be of interest to the research community, consumer groups, and other stakeholders. This report draws from extensive testing involving more than 7,000 measurement devices provisioned to volunteers around the United States. The study examines service offerings from 13 of the largest broadband providers, which collectively account for well over 80% of all U.S. wireline broadband connections. It covers the three most common residential broadband technologies: DSL, cable, and fiber. Here at the table with me are Deborah Broderson from the Consumer and Governmental Affairs Bureau, James Miller from the Office of Engineering and Technology, and Walter Johnston, also from the Office of Engineering and Technology. This report is a joint project of staff from CGB, OET, and other parts of the Commission, including our CTO, Henning Schultz-Rennie, right behind me. With that, I turn it over to Deborah.
All testing included in this report was conducted in April 2012. Testing for the August 2011 report was conducted in March 2011. This gives us a roughly 1-year time frame to compare results. The bottom line is that we see striking across-the-board improvements in key metrics underlying user performance. The report provides extensive detail about these results, and the accompanying technical appendix and data sets will give the public and the research community the opportunity to scrutinize these results and engage in additional analysis. For purposes of this presentation, we're going to focus on 2 key areas of improvement. ISP promises of performance are more accurate, and consumers are subscribing to faster tiers. First, ISPs improved in their delivery of promised speeds. During the 2012 testing period, ISPs did a better job than they did in 2011 of delivering speeds reaching or exceeding advertised speeds, even during 7 to 11 p.m. on weeknights when usage is at its peak and bandwidth is subject to the most demand. Second, consumers of the ISPs participating in the study are subscribing to faster speed tiers and are experiencing faster actual speeds than in 2011. The bars in this chart, it's a little small, it's larger on the web and in the final report, represent actual download speed during times of peak usage as a percentage of advertised download speed. The blue bars indicate this performance as reported last year. The red bars show the performance as reported in our current report for the 2012 testing period. Taken together, this chart depicts changes in the ISP's ability to deliver their advertised speeds. As you can see, improvements are almost across the board, and some are dramatic. Again, this chart shows performance during periods of peak usage, between 7 and 11 p.m. on weeknights. Although we analyze and are releasing data outside this time period, we focus primarily on this period in the report because we think this is the time of day when consumers are most likely to be using their broadband connections and when the performance is most likely to be affected by congestion. A little more detail about our findings on actual versus advertised performance. 5 ISPs now routinely deliver 100% or greater of the speed advertised to the consumer even during this peak period. In August 2011, only 2 ISPs met this level of performance, and the average ISP delivered 87% of advertised download speed during this peak period. In 2011, the average ISP delivered 96% of advertised speed. Consumers today are experiencing performance more closely aligned than what was advertised to them 1 year ago. It is also important to note that our analysis shows that the improvements of ISPs in meeting their advertised speeds were largely driven by improvements in network performance and not downward adjustments to the speed tiers offered. As my colleague James Miller will talk about in a moment, there was a significant increase in the April 2012 test data in the actual average speed delivered by participating ISPs to their customers. James?
Thank you, Deborah. So the chart displayed shows a breakdown of average performance by service delivery technology. We examined the performance of a broadband technologies by surveying all the subscribers using a specific technology. We note that individual ISPs using these technologies have achieved higher speeds and results than are shown, and these are simply the averages of the technologies, not to represent any particular ISP. So you'll see that there is some difference by technology in whether advertised speeds are being delivered. However, we want to note that all three delivery technologies improved at least somewhat compared to last year's study. You can also see that as a general rule, ISPs more consistently deliver speeds meeting or exceeding advertised speeds for uploads than they do for downloads. The second general point for the report that we want to highlight is that consumers are adopting faster speed tiers and experiencing faster actual speeds. This is a result of upgrades by ISPs to their networks, as well as some migration of consumers to higher speed services. To illustrate this shift, we computed the average speed offered by ISPs across all panelists in 2011 and 2012. And due to the manner in which the panelists are chosen, this provides a rough correlation with an average subscribed tier within the United States for the participating ISPs during the testing period. During the testing period for the August 2011 report, the average speed tier was 11.1 megabits per second. For this report, it increased to 14.3 megabits per second. That's an almost 30% increase in just 1 year. Because consumers are adopting faster speed tiers and because ISPs are doing a better job on delivering speeds or exceeding what they advertise, the actual speed experienced by consumers of participating ISPs increased by an even greater percentage. The average actual speed in March 2011 was 10.6 megabits per second. The average actual speed in April 2012 was 14.6 megabits per second. This represents an almost 38% improvement over the 1 year period. We wanted to note some other highlights from the report. This year we looked at how service tier affects data consumption. We found that in general, the higher the speed tier, the more data consumed by the average user. This supports a view that as higher speeds are made available to consumers increase the amount of data they consume, presumably through some combination of greater use of the internet and adoption of more data-intensive applications and services. Another highlight is that we see that more of the participating ISPs are offering very fast broadband. Even though our study focuses on the most popular service tiers within a company, not on the maximum speeds that may be offered, we are encouraged to see that higher and higher speed tiers are becoming available to consumers. Last year, the fastest service tier that was popular enough to be included in our testing was 35 megabits per second. In this year's report, 2 ISPs had tiers in excess of 35 megabits per second that were sufficiently popular to be included in the survey, and many ISPs have begun to introduce tiers of 100 megabits per second and higher for consumer use. Although not all of the ultra-high-speed tiers had sufficient subscription rates to be included in the July 2012 report, at least 7 of the ISPs participating in this study advertised tiers of 50 megabits per second, and 4 of those ISPs also offer tiers of 100 megabits per second or higher in at least some of their service areas. We look forward to studying how efficiently ISPs can deliver promised 100 megabits per second speeds in future reports. And with that, I'll turn it over to my colleague, Walter Johnston.
Thank you, James. I want to talk about a few words about next steps. Most importantly, we need to continue to encourage improvements in both speed and capacity. We were very encouraged by this year's results and in some instances very surprised. We need to continue our progress towards the National Broadband Plan goals. That means much higher speeds even than we have right now. This report also indicates significant progress, but continuing these kinds of improvements is essential. Also, as we discussed, faster speeds will drive more data consumption, and data caps will likely have to rise to keep pace with consumer demand. We plan to engage in another round of testing this fall with a report to be delivered by the end of 2012. In fact, our first meeting on this is next week with our collaborators. We expect to expand our testing so that the report will include additional broadband delivery technologies such as satellite. For this report, we're releasing data from the April 2012 time period, and we'll soon be releasing another comprehensive data set for other testing periods, along with scripts and other information so that the research community and other institutions can make full use of the information we have collected. Everything we collect, we put out on the web, we put out the scripts, the databases, the data dictionaries, and we're very encouraged to see people start using those. Our goal is to continue to promote openness and transparency by releasing all data collected in support of the report to ensure that the public gets detailed, accurate, and meaningful information about a kind of service that has become integral to our daily lives. Finally, we plan to continue the fruitful collaboration that we have had with the stakeholder community, with the ISPs, the academic researchers, the public interest groups, and others that have informed this process. This is really most important to me. This has been a rare opportunity to work in a different fashion than we do at the Commission. This report was made possible by really unprecedented collaboration between the Commission, between MLab, which is a collaborative set up to support Internet research, 13 of the largest ISPs in the United States supporting over 80% of this nation, researchers from 2 academic institutions, and many other stakeholders, including manufacturers, consumer groups, and others who have been working with us to produce this report. We would like to thank them all for working with us, and we hope to continue this highly productive and collaborative effort. Thank you.
Excellent presentation, and thank you. I'll have more to say, but Commissioner McDowell.
Thank you for your presentation, and I have nothing formal to say or to post to the website or anything, but a few comments. One question, actually. So does your data, and I may have missed this at some point, does your data include wireless broadband?
Not at the present time.
Okay. And is there a reason for that?
Well, in fact, let me be more specific. We do have some satellite and on terrestrial wireless data in our data set, which we will release. It's not at a level that's statistically significant for the report. It's an issue of focus and priorities. We will be focusing on satellite by the end of the year, and we are considering other technologies. It's a matter of working with another company, getting support, and actually getting volunteers for this effort.
Okay, because as you know, consumers are more and more accessing the internet through mobile technologies, and wireless broadband is the fastest growth segment of the broadband market. So I would hope in the future we can make that clear as to what it is we're studying, and then also include more of that in reports. And if you need support in that regard, we'd be happy to help you do that.
Yeah, we are working toward that, and we are making progress toward.
Terrific, and whatever we can do to help, just want to say it. So I think there's some very encouraging numbers here, if this is a wireline-only report, but the vast majority of consumers are receiving their advertised speeds. We see speeds increasing, and I think that's the sign of a competitive market where there is investment, although I have been concerned in the past couple of years where overall capital expenditures in this market has been frozen at about $66 billion per year. I don't know where that's going this year, but we'll find out soon. But it sounds like a lot of these increased speeds, according to your data, is due to network upgrades. But we have to keep in mind that the most important factor in all this is private capital. As Jose Mas said yesterday at the MMTC event, and he owns Mas Tech in Florida, and they build the conduits and a lot of the infrastructure that makes all this happen in that part of the world, that part of the country. That really is private capital that's going to make this happen. So as we adopt policies, we need to make sure we're encouraging that and not discouraging that, whether that's inadvertent or not. So thank you very much for your presentation today. Look forward to drilling down on it into more detail and in the future as well. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Commissioner Clyburn.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Kirshner, first for my sneak preview, and for all of you, the staff, especially CGB and OET, for such an informative presentation that contains a lot of good news for Internet consumers. The fact that they are getting faster service is especially important for those who are relying more upon the net for service than ever before. We have consumers who are conducting their businesses from home, including workers who are telecommuting to save costs, or those who are trying to better balance their family life with work. More consumers are relying on their Internet connections to communicate with their loved ones around the globe, such as our young men and women in the armed forces, and these endeavors are stimulating the economy and are keeping us better connected with each other. Knowing that this service has notably improved over the last year with respect to speeds is a fact that I hope is widely reported, for if consumers are made aware of these results, it should further spur confidence and bring about more robust, high-speed broadband adoption. I want to thank the chairman for his leadership on his issue. I don't know what that word was, but issue. Our staff, I love to fuse words, so, we're talking about these converged technologies, so I'm converging words, but so forgive that. Our staff for their hard work on this report, and for the others that you made mention, Mr. Johnson, including industry members whose involvement in this study has better informed the agency and the consumers about the speeds they are delivering. So, again, I thank you.
Thank you very much. Commissioner Rosenworcel.
As the uses of broadband multiply in our lives, so do the questions. Will this connection work for high-definition streaming video? Will it support online learning? Is it sufficient for teleconferencing? Can it support development of a website? Will it let me play video games? And is it reliable enough for critical telemedicine functions? I think that answering these kind of queries is actually what today's report is all about. And as your demonstration suggests, by and large, the news is good. But these tests do more than shine a light on actual speeds delivered to consumers. They remind us that it is essential that consumers fully understand these speeds and how they can use the capacity they provide. So going forward, I welcome expanding this measurement project to new technologies, as my colleague Commissioner McDowell suggested. And I look forward to looking for new ways to provide consumers with the information they need and the broadband services they want.
Thank you. Commissioner Pai.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks to all of you for that presentation. The key question underlying this set of reports is simple. Are consumers getting what they pay for when it comes to broadband? No one doubts that consumers are getting at or above the maximum advertised speed during non-peak hours. So the open issue has been how well ISPs manage congestion during peak hours to keep consumers close to the advertised maximums. Last year's answer, as you set forth, largely was yes. Ms. Broderson recited those statistics, in particular that overall ISP speeds were at 87% of the maximum advertised downlink, with even higher speeds or higher percentage for fiber. And upload speeds were pretty good too. DSL at 95%, cable at 108%, and fiber at 112%. I'm pleased, as you are, that in 2012 the answer is even more resoundingly yes, with across-the-board improvements. And I think that's something that both we, the Commission, and the consumers at large appreciate. I'm glad to see that ISPs are making the right investments and engineering decisions for their customers, and that customers, as I said at the beginning, are truly getting what they pay for when it comes to broadband. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Pai. And thank you. I know that a tremendous amount of work goes into actually to doing this, and I appreciate the incredible diligence and focus from all of you on this and the people who you've worked with. In addition to promoting innovation, investment, and competition, promoting consumer empowerment in the ICT sector has been one of the Commission's core priorities over the past 3 years. As part of the FCC's consumer empowerment agenda, we've been working to arm consumers with information to help them make smart choices about the broadband service that's right for them, promoting competition, which promotes innovation and investment, better service, lower prices. The broadband speed test was an early key initiative in this area. As you'll recall, we developed and released an app that people could use on their computers or smartphones to measure, to get a readout of broadband speeds. American consumers have run more than 1 million of those speed tests, which shows the demand for consumer information about broadband and the service that they're actually getting. Other important consumer initiatives, including clamping down on mystery fees, telemarketers, cramming, and bill shock. We've identified bad conduct and imposed record-breaking penalties. We've adopted rules to protect consumers. And we've worked with industry to develop technology tools to help consumers avoid needless and unfair overage charges. Transparency has been at the heart of many of our consumer initiatives, particularly transparency that employs modern technology tools. It's a matter of basic fairness to consumers to take advantage of modern tools to help consumers get better, accurate, useful information. It's also belief that better information can help the market work, that we can use technology as a tool, as a smart government effort to empower consumers, promote competition, and bring benefits in terms of better services and lower prices. And so about a year ago, we took an important step in using tech-driven transparency to empower broadband consumers with the release of the first Measuring Broadband America report. It's the most comprehensive and rigorous assessment ever of broadband performance in the United States. And it's useful to remember why we went about doing this. We went about doing this because during our work on the National Broadband Plan, we saw information that raised real concerns, that there was a gap between what ISPs were advertising and what consumers were receiving. And we brought some attention to that gap. We shined a light on that gap. It's one of the reasons that we put out the initial speed test apps. And as we thought through the most effective and efficient way to address that gap, we developed this broadband speed test, a way to accurately measure what's going on. And it actually doesn't matter what the reason was. I would call it a happy coincidence. But by the time the reports came out, we saw in general not a gap, or not a significant gap, between advertised speeds and actual speeds. Today's report is a one-year update, of course, and the first-year report and now the strong improvements we see this year is a case study of how smart government-driven transparency can drive better outcomes. There's little doubt that the information from the report last year fueled competition in the marketplace. High performers in that report touted their rankings in TV and radio ads, in blogs and articles. The word got out far and wide. And the lower performers changed their speeds, changed their advertising, developed an approach that brought them in line with their competitors, and indeed, as we see in this user report, exceed their competitors. So I commend the seriousness with which the ISPs, both cable and telco, have taken this effort. I applaud the very strong improvement of Cablevision from last year to this, from outlier to one of this year's best performers in terms of delivering on advertised speed. And I welcome the support and ongoing engagement of the public interest community, of the research community in this effort. This measurement project is the result of a unique collaboration of the public interest community, researchers, ISPs, and commission staff. Together, working hard at consensus, this group has addressed many challenging issues over time. A hallmark of this effort has been the adherence in principles of open data, open process, and scientific rigor. We're committed to these principles and will continue to honor them as this project moves forward. Now, the bottom line of this report is that millions of Americans have better broadband performance this year than they did last year. That's good news for consumers. It's good news for our economy. Faster broadband has brought untold benefits to millions of Americans, from distance learning to distance healthcare to telecommuting, as Commissioner Clyburn mentioned, from being able to see and hear loved ones thousands of miles away to being able to access the internet from anywhere. But of course, we can't be satisfied and we're not. To realize the full power of broadband's potential, we must continue to see increases in broadband speed and capacity and decreases in per gigabyte costs. Without higher capacity, a student might not be able to complete her studies, a patient might not be able to have another needed checkup, a child might not be able to have another video chat with a parent who is a service member overseas. And critically, abundance is what drives innovation. Very fast broadband bandwidth and very high capacity are essential for the innovations of today, and strong continued improvements in speed and capacity are essential for the innovations of tomorrow. We can't realize the immense potential benefits, for example, of cloud computing without broadband abundance, the ability to quickly and cheaply move large amounts of data through the internet. What's at stake is our global competitiveness and the power of innovation to create jobs. By some estimates, cloud computing has the potential to create over 1 million jobs in the U.S. by 2015 and more thereafter. It's very good news, again, that we are seeing this year increases in the 30% range of consumer broadband speeds from last year to this year. And we know that the speeds of networks that have been rolled out, that there have been significant improvements. 3 years ago, broadband networks capable of 100 megabits or more were available to only about 20% of American consumers. Today, that number is over 80%, a very significant increase in 3 years. But we have to keep pressing on ongoing improvements in speed and capacity. We want to be talking not about megabits, but about gigabits. That's what will drive massive innovation in the United States and ensure that we remain the global leader in broadband. Finally, as you noted, we're committed to expanding this report and other consumer-oriented public-private initiatives, particularly those relating to technology to enhance information. As Commissioner McDowell indicated, I completely agree. The next big challenge is measuring mobile broadband performance. There have been initial discussions, Daniel, as you mentioned. We've made significant progress. Let's all work together to make sure that consumers have meaningful and accurate mobile broadband information. We have a lot to be proud of in the U.S. as we roll out 4G LTE at scale ahead of the rest of the world. I look forward to working with my colleagues, with all of you, with the mobile industry, with the public interest community, with researchers to make this happen, to deliver the kinds of consumer benefits we've seen from this residential broadband report. So thanks to all of you very much. I want to acknowledge all the people sitting at the table, also Henning, our CTO, who has made this really one of his focuses as CTO. Henning, I'm going to threaten that we're going to do a CTO presentation at a meeting coming up, but this is one of your many achievements at the Commission so far. And Daniel, Walter, James, Deborah, all of you, just excellent work. And thank you very much. So with that, I think this panel is concluded. Yep. And Madam Secretary, am I correct that this concludes our presentations for today?
That is correct.
And so let me ask my colleagues if there are any personnel announcements. And the answer is yes. Commissioner McDowell.
We do have a happy announcement. So on Wednesday, July 11th at 8:30 in the morning, Maura Lee Calamus was born, weighing in at 7 pounds 6 ounces. She, of course, is the second child, first daughter of my Deputy Chief of Staff, Bridget Nealon Calamus. And everyone is doing wonderful, except for the McDowell office, because we're without Bridget. And so she will come back sometime this fall. But we're delighted that it's a happy event. In the meantime, Tasha Kinney has taken over Bridget's role. So that's tasha.kinny@fcc.gov for those of you watching wanting appointments and such. And then Marquita Boozer has been added to give us a new cheerful element as our first line of defense at the front desk of the McDowell office. So we are delighted with all these changes, and it's been a happy time. Thank you.
Excellent. Commissioner Clyburn? Anything? No? Commissioner Rosenworcester?
I just wanted to introduce Michael Leving, who is joining our office as an intern this summer. He is a graduate of Columbia and a student at the University of Colorado Law School. Between college and law school, he taught in the Czech Republic and also worked for public relations firms in New York. He spent the early part of the summer at Hogan Lovells in town. We are thrilled to have him. He is our only intern for the summer, so we are small in numbers but mighty in force.
Thank you. Commissioner Pai, any announcements?
I do have an announcement, Mr. Chairman. This morning I want to take a moment to introduce the newest member of our staff, Nick Degani, who is my wireline legal advisor. Nick comes to us from a detail to the House of Representatives Energy and Commerce Committee, where he served as counsel under Chairman Fred Upton and Communications and Technology Subcommittee Chairman Greg Walden. His portfolio there included communications issues and agencies with a focus on the Universal Service Fund, intercarrier compensation, privacy, cybersecurity, agency jurisdiction and spending, and the administrative process, the easy and non-controversial stuff, of course. Before his detail, Nick served as an attorney advisor in the Wireline Competition Bureau's Telecommunications Access Policy Division, where he worked on issues related to the Universal Service Fund's low income in schools and libraries programs, as well as contributions and eligible telecommunications carrier issues. Nick has also worked in WCB's Competition Policy Division, where he worked on pole attachment issues, transactional review, broadband policy, and numbering issues related to internet-based TRS. He appears to know something about wireline, I think. In 2008, Nick served in the Office of General Counsel, where I first had the privilege of working with him. The year before that, in 2007, he entered the Commission through the Attorney Honors Program. And suffice it to say that he is a great example of the value that the program brings to the Commission. And Ms. Broderson, I think, was a classmate of his there, and she also demonstrates that the Honors Program is valuable. Earlier in his career, Nick served as a law clerk to Judge Jeff Sutton on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Sixth Circuit. He graduated cum laude from Harvard Law School and magna cum laude from Yale, where he studied electrical engineering, computer science, and history. I'm very pleased that he has agreed to come aboard. We also have an intern for the summer. I want to introduce our summer law clerk, Jeremy Pedersen. Jeremy was born in Northern Virginia, but he primarily grew up in the Panhandle of Florida in a town that apparently is really called Niceville. Jeremy graduated from the University of Florida, and then he moved back to the D.C. area, where he worked as a paralegal at a litigation firm downtown. Apparently not having gotten the memo, he still wanted to practice law and enrolled at George Washington University, where he is a rising 3L and a member of the mock trial board. Jeremy already has made substantial contributions to our office, and we are very happy to have him on the team this summer. Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Let me add my welcome to all the new employees in the commissioner's offices. Let me add my congratulations on Bridget's baby, which we're very excited about. I want everyone to join me in congratulating Renee Wenzel, who is back from having gotten married just a couple of weeks ago. Renee, of course, joined our office in the agency, I guess, about 6 weeks ago. Of course, we knew that she would be leaving, and we're so thrilled, Renee, that you're back, and we congratulate you. There are a couple of departures I want to acknowledge. First, Josh Gottheimer is a little bit quieter today because, in fact, Josh has already gone. But I do want to thank Josh, who has been one of my most trusted advisors for the last 3 years, working tirelessly, and by tirelessly I do mean 25 hours a day to drive our agenda. I made either this was a mistake or the right thing to do with Josh. I said, listen, what we're about is innovation, investment, competition, and consumers. And Josh woke up every day asking himself the question, what are we going to do today to promote innovation, investment, competition, and consumers? And he drove a very long series of successful initiatives at the Commission to achieve those goals. Everything from our Connect to Compete initiative, our cybersecurity initiative, where we have 90% of American of ISPs covering 90% of subscribers signed up to a botnet code of conduct, making progress on DNSSEC and IP route hijacking. Our stolen cell phone initiative, many, many more. Josh, as many of you who've worked with him know, has a point of view on message discipline. I say the same thing over and over again. I've been advised, and I'm going to interpret that probably in only a partially correct way. I'm going to tell you a quick story that I told at Josh's going away party. When Josh came to my attention as a potential senior hire at the FCC, I happen to know the person who Josh worked for in the 1990s at the White House. He's an old friend of mine, and I called him up and I said, Josh Gottheimer, what about him? And my friend said, and this was very early after I was privileged to get this job, my friend said, do you want to get anything done? And I said, yes. And he said, well, then you have to hire Josh. And that was pretty much the reference call. I did hire Josh, and thanks to Josh, we've gotten a lot of things done. Of course, by singling out Josh, I'm just so lucky to have the team that we have at the agency. And Josh, by the way, would be the first to acknowledge that the things that he has gotten done, that he has led, could not have happened without the work of people across the agency, and in fact, without my friends and colleagues on the 8th floor. One of the things that I think will be sort of a legacy of Josh's work that I want to mention is the public-private initiative team. We made Josh the first director of public-private initiatives at the FCC because I do believe that it is one of the ways that the Commission can drive positive outcomes for consumers, for innovation, for investment, and I think Josh helped define that role and show how much can be done. So we're very, very grateful to him for that, for the work on broadband adoption, digital literacy, ed tech, M-health, public safety. Of course, he did all this with energy, enthusiasm, creativity, a darn good sense of humor, and we will miss him very much and thank him for his service. Let me also acknowledge another superstar who has announced that she is leaving the agency, Sharon Gillette. Sharon Gillette, too, has discovered that there are 25 hours in a day somehow. Sharon, of course, has led our wireline bureau for the last 3 years, and that bureau could not have been in better hands, not even close, and we're very, very lucky, Sharon, that you chose to move here from Massachusetts. Sharon was the state commissioner in Massachusetts. Massachusetts has a one-person commission. It's a structure I find interesting. Nevertheless, Sharon, I would say that Sharon was as good as any bureau chief we've ever had at the Commission in working with all of the commissioners. And not only managing a very large bureau with a very large plate of work, but also taking on the responsibility of making sure that all the commissioners were kept briefed on a regular basis. And as you were leading our efforts to work through some very complex areas, making sure that we kept them as commission activities with full knowledge and information. And so, in fact, we've seen, I think, the most active and successful time in the Wireline Bureau in its history, with the successful adoption of our Universal Service Reform Order, reforming intercarrier compensation, putting in place the Bold Connect America Fund, the Mobility Fund. These were all things that, Sharon, as you know, you and I were both warned not to attempt. And there were those who guaranteed that there was no chance. And, you know, our little secret is that all the credit deserves goes to you and your team for keeping those processes on a path where together at the Commission we all now get to benefit from the work that you delivered. And we all know here, particularly Commissioner McDowell and Commissioner Clyburn, who were in all through of it, but Commissioner Pye and Commissioner Rosenworcel saw this from outside, the work that you did to study the data and facts, to work with all stakeholders, to resolve some of the most complex and trickiest policy issues the Commission has ever had to face. It's really just an extraordinary thing. And at the same time, you've done just a fantastic job administratively at the agency. I was very happy to see the backlog reduction report that you delivered, and it was something that you were very focused on making real progress on, particularly before you left. I think the number was a 30% reduction in the backlog at the Wireline Bureau. We know how hard that is. We appreciate that very much. I could go on listing the things that you've done. Some of the very important things that you got done, we got done relatively early, and I've already forgotten them, but they're very important. Our E-rate reform is a big deal. We're seeing every day when we meet with teachers the benefits that they're having from the reforms we took to help them get more speeds at lower costs. Lifeline, I may have mentioned, but the Lifeline reforms are incredibly important, both from the perspective of ensuring that low-income people in America get the services that are contemplated by the Communications Act, and that we're doing it in a way that's fiscally responsible and taking fraud and abuse very seriously. Pole attachments, you've heard me describe that as sort of the blood and guts of actually driving broadband infrastructure in the United States. Another complicated thing, but I hear every day from stakeholders in the community saying that, from their perspective, the pole attachment order is the most important thing we've done at the Commission in the last 3 years. We did innovative things to allow faster broadband build-out, to allow DAS antennas on poles, a very big contribution to America's innovation infrastructure, Sharon, and you deserve the credit for that as well. And I would note that one of the things that you took the time to do in your last few months in the job is to provide some leadership about the future. You gave an important speech about the future of PSTN, and you've been thinking about that. And I think through all the specific accomplishments you have, and then also the open thinking that you've done about the future of PSTN, you leave a very large, significant, important legacy. And we thank you very much. We wish you well in Massachusetts, and we expect great things of you. We expect great things of Josh, and we thank you both for your service. That is all that I had. Commissioner, you said you wanted to mention.
I just wanted to make sure I also said a couple of kind words about Josh, who I've already said this a couple of times. Extremely hardworking, very bright, very capable, a lot of fun, especially at the craps table. In case you're ever in Vegas with Josh, just be careful. But he's a lot of fun. And then Sharon. Sharon actually and I first met way back, long before her time here at the FCC, back when she was the sole commissioner, the model that you are relishing, in Massachusetts. There was a broadband hearing of sorts, town hall, I guess, that we were setting up in the Berkshires in western Massachusetts, and it's hard for folks to imagine that there was a broadband gap in Massachusetts, but there was and still is in some places. So with Senator Kerry and Congressman Markey and leadership from the governor's office and leadership from Sharon, we set up a town hall that was to have taken place in the Berkshires. And I was there, the Virginian, and then a snowstorm started to bear down on the place, and all of the flinty northerners scattered. I was there ready for the hearing, so here I was, the southerner from Virginia, ready to go, but they canceled it. So anyway, broadband in Western Mass improved nonetheless, or maybe because we canceled it, I don't know. But and by the way, Commissioner Clyburn, I know you don't consider Virginia the South, but you're from South Carolina, but then Alabamans don't consider South Carolina.
His words, not mine. His words, not mine.
But in any case, but thank you for all of your hard and imaginative work. You have worked on giant issues that are of historic proportions, in FCC land, historic, and are huge to millions of American consumers. And you're to be commended. They're very complex, as the chairman said. Other commissions had tried and failed to accomplish what you accomplished. I do hope, however, your departure does not mean that we're not going to tackle contribution reform. You saw that one coming. Your time is interesting, but I hope there's not a tea leaf there for us all to read on contribution reform. But thank you so much for your excellent time in public service here in Washington.
Thank you. I would like to also speak to the two of you, one about that one commissioner comment and the commissioner about that southern comment later. But I really would like to join in wishing Josh all the best. He has been appropriately roasted and toasted, deservedly so, as it relates to his unique style and approach to getting things done. But yes, he did get things done, and so we wish him the best and acknowledge that his style, that unique style, has resulted in meaningful change at the FCC. He will be missed. Well referenced, but missed. And to Commissioner Emeritus Gillette, I was extremely excited when I learned that she was going to join us at the FCC, because I knew that my friend, and I consider her my friend, is accustomed to looking at this ecosystem through both a national and state lens. And I believe that those unique perspectives were definitely key to your incredible success and key to our incredible success. I've learned more over the past couple of years with you than ever. Your fabulous team, particularly on these issues that have been hard fought, it's just been incredible. Your intellect and keen understanding of the industry and of our policy goals were of great benefit to me, my office, and yes, the nation. So thank you, Sharon, for your leadership and for your friendship. I wish you and your family all the best as you head back to Boston in a continuation of such a fine career. You will be missed, but we wish you the best. Thank you so much.
So let me just add my voice to the chorus, also wishing Josh on what lies ahead. And Sharon, who's here today, I may be new to the agency, but Sharon is actually not new to me. When I spent time working in the Senate staff on passage of the Broadband Data Improvement Act, Sharon was legend for what she had done as the director of the Massachusetts Broadband Institute. And now she's legend in these halls for pushing ahead and finding a way forward on universal service reform. For that, you should absolutely be commended. And I think also the chairman, it was a real coup for him to draw you down here from Massachusetts. And we wish you well as you head back to the Bay State.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a brief word to add to my colleagues' comments. To Josh, I regret that our tenure won't overlap as much as I would have liked, but I do thank you for your service to the Commission. As the Chairman was describing your legacy, my mind at least was called to Pulp Fiction, and I imagined you as a Mr. Wolf, showing up to a meeting and solving problems. And I think every Chairman, every Commission needs a Mr. Wolf, and that legacy will be missed here, but I look for the next Harvey Keitel to show up any day now. To Chief Gillette, thank you as well for your service to the Commission. My colleagues have thoroughly described your accomplishments, and I want to concur in their assessment. You've been terrific, and even in my short 2 months at the Commission, you've demonstrated that you understand the issues so thoroughly, and you can explain them to those of us who don't have as much expertise as you do. I simply want to add what I've said to several of your divisions, and that is that I thank you for your work on universal service reform. You seem to have drawn inspiration from President Kennedy's statement 50 years ago that, to paraphrase him, we choose to reform the universal system in this decade, not because it is easy, but because it is hard. And that is no small feat, and you, Chairman Janikowski, Commissioners McDowell and Clyburn, all deserve tremendous credit for that. So thank you, and best wishes as you head back to Boston.
So thank you. So to both Josh Gottheimer and Sharon Gillette for the contributions that you've made, for your willingness to engage in public service and do it with the right spirit. Everyone, please join me in thanking those two great public servants. Now, Commissioner McDowell asked me, this is as we both approach the half-century point in our lives, our memories fail, and neither of us are sure whether we've appropriately welcomed Sean Lev to the agency. And so I'm going to check that. And if we haven't, Sean, we will welcome you appropriately at our next commission meeting. We might also employ the strategy of never formally welcoming you so that you can never leave, which would be in the commission's interest. But thank you for being here, and we'll revisit the topic of Sean Lev at the next meeting. Madam Secretary, if you would announce the date of our next commission meeting.
The next commission meeting the next meeting of the Federal Communications Commission is Friday, August 3rd, 2012.
Great. Thank you. With that, we are adjourned, and thank you, everyone, very much. For waiting. Which is my one. I think this is my water. Here we go. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Are you talking to me, Neil? What are you saying? I can't hear you.
I'm going to start with
Whatever.
WTOP.
One question that didn't come up during the discussion on 911 and the retro this morning. But we're hearing from the public and local governments that there's a complete breakdown between Verizon, the public, the local governments, and the media. They failed to hear any of the problems when they were occurring hours delayed.
Do you want to wait? It's up to you.
And sometimes hours delayed. And I was wondering, in the scope of the FCC probe, whether that would be looked at, and is there anything you can do to make Verizon do it better?
Well, there's as we said this morning, there's no question that things went wrong during and after the derecho, that they were significant. They resulted in 911 going dark in a number of different places for much longer than it should. So that's why we've launched an inquiry. We've been working on it from the very early minutes. Yesterday we announced that we're expanding the investigation to reach out to a broader group of stakeholders. But we're absolutely committed to following the facts where they go, to understanding what went wrong, and to taking the lessons out so we can make sure that it doesn't happen again.
That's the point, though. The point is about the breakdown in communication. This was a major failure just to call the local government and say, hey, 911 is down.
Right. Again, we'll be investigating that. I think it's appropriate for the investigations to go forward, for the facts to be collected, and those are some of the questions that will be addressed in the investigation that we do.
Paul Kirby at TR Daily. The public notice mentions backup power. Several congressmen from Northern Virginia have asked the FCC to revisit backup power. Several years ago, the FCC abandoned its backup power rules. Do you favor mandatory backup power rules in the wake of this storm?
Well, I think backup power is one of the things that we'll look at in the course of this investigation and the inquiry. Certainly, as I mentioned in my remarks, the derecho helped see how reliant our communications infrastructure is on our electric grid. So looking at the power issues is something that we'll do.
Hi, Chairman Paul Barbagallo with BNA. Tomorrow, PCAST is set to release its report on spectrum sharing, and we heard a lot today about spectrum sharing. And I'm curious how you see this playing out in the near term. I mean, can spectrum sharing mitigate the spectrum crunch in the near term, middle term, or should this be seen as a longer range policy goal?
The answer is that there are both short-term and long-term opportunities. There are short-term, medium-term, and long-term opportunities. The short-term opportunity that we see from sharing involves the 1755 band. So Julie Knapp talked about it today. There are people today in Idaho. This is the one where we have an experimental license application saying, let's start testing it. We know enough to know that in the 1755 band, some of the interference issues that need to be resolved involve Air Force bases. And so the goal is to identify Air Force bases to do some testing. We would like to move quickly on this. We think we can move quickly on this. We have the opportunity, if we can move quickly on this, to pair the bottom part of the 1755 band with other spectrum that we have available in the 2100 band. I can't remember exactly where it is, which we are under instructions from Congress to auction in the next 3 years. So we're going to be working very hard on this. we're going to be working on getting support from Congress and elsewhere to move quickly on the sharing concept in 1755, because that's the most likely way to be able to maximize the value of that spectrum by pairing it, and to do it by the time of the congressional deadline for the 2100.
Is there any timing on the testing in the 1755?
There isn't yet, because we're working with the military agencies to identify the basis for testing. But again, that's what's happening today. You can get more details for Julie Knapp on those conversations.
Thank you.
Yeah, hi, Jim Puzengaro with the LA Times. Hey, I'm wondering if you can give me an update on the media ownership review. And related to that, the Tribune Company is preparing to come out of bankruptcy, and I'm wondering if you have a view on, they have requests in for a number of waivers in order to complete that process, and I'm wondering if you have a view on whether those waivers are appropriate or what your sense is on that.
So on media ownership, as you know, we have an NPRM out. Comments have come in, and we're on a track to issue an order in that proceeding by the end of the year. On Tribune, I'd have to go back and check on the exact timing. There's some paperwork that needs to be filed with the Commission. I'm not sure if it's been filed yet, but certainly as soon as it's filed, the Media Bureau will take it up and move efficiently.
Hi, Mr. Chairman. Todd Shields, Bloomberg News. On your indecency policy in the wake of the Supreme Court decisions, what next, and what do you say to the broadcasters whose licenses are being, the renewals are being held because of complaints that are pending?
Well, the Bureau now, as I've said, is analyzing both the opinion and the backlog that we've had. It's been frozen for a number of years because the litigation has gone on for some time, and obviously now that the Supreme Court has made that decision, that's a real focus. I welcome the opportunity that the Supreme Court has given us to ensure that our implementation of the congressional directive is fully consistent with the First Amendment and freedom of speech.
Chairman Matthew Schwartz, Communications Daily. You said that we need to keep pushing for higher speeds to ensure that we, quote, remain the global leader in broadband. But a New America Foundation study out today finds that U.S. consumers tend to pay higher prices for slower speeds compared to consumer abroad, where it's common to get a bundle of TV, telephone, and 100 megabit internet for $35, for example. In Hong Kong, you can get 500 megabit symmetrical speeds comparable to what we're paying today for 25 megabit. Does this concern you, and what can the FCC do to bring the U.S. in line with the rest of the world?
So that's a good question. Let me first identify the areas where in the last few years the U.S. has regained global leadership. So one, on mobile infrastructure, mobile broadband infrastructure, the U.S. is the first country in the world to scale at 4G LTE. It's a very big deal. Number one. Number two, we are leading the world now in mobile innovation in terms of mobile platforms and applications. And if you think about it, 4 years ago we were all talking about how in Japan and South Korea they were doing incredible things on their mobile devices. Why isn't that happening here? People were talking about Europe and its speed on 3G and the fact that Europeans were texting and the like. If you take a snapshot of the world today, it's a very different world. When you look at smartphone apps and platforms, we've gone from about 20% of global mobile phones having U.S. Operating systems to 80%, an astonishing change in 3 or 4 years. I mentioned the 4G LTE rollout, and of course, around the world, including Japan and South Korea and Europe, they're using American apps. They're using Twitter, they're using Facebook, they're using Google, they're using LinkedIn, they're using other things. In the apps economy in general, we're leading the world. We invented the apps economy here in the U.S. It's creating jobs. It's leading to incredible innovation. On broadband speeds, particularly compared to comparable countries. That means countries that have the kind of population density that we have. There's no question that we're ahead of any country that's comparable. And we take it as a challenge that there are countries that have, that are basically city-states where we still have more work to do by those comparisons, but that's good. Now, finally, on the price point that you mentioned, I do think that that's an issue that we need to continue to make progress on in the U.S. My understanding is that the gap is closing. That if you compare where we are on prices versus Europe now versus a few years ago, the gap is closing. It's why it's so important to continue to promote competition using all the tools that we have. We've used a number of different tools in my tenure at the FCC, and we continue to focus on competition because ultimately that's the best way to make sure that we get good prices and very high value per price in the United States.
Thank you.
I'm on? Yeah. Brooks Bolick, Politico. MLabs sent a letter to you yesterday or the day before saying that FCC is going to move the broadband measurement to give it to the ISPs. A, is that true? And B, why wouldn't that just put Fox in charge of the hen house?
It's not the case. As I mentioned in my remarks, we're very committed to two things. One is to a collaborative process that includes all the stakeholders, so obviously includes the ISPs whose speeds have to be measured, but includes researchers, it includes the public interest community, number one. And number two, to continue to be committed to openness, open data, openness in everything that we do. So I spoke about that today. You heard the presenters speak about that today. It's very important. It's been the way that we've handled it in each of our reports. We're committed to continuing it and to seeing that commitment to openness being institutionalized as part of the process for speed testing.
Mr. Chairman, I'm Mike Gravino with the Civic Affairs TV network. We're new here. We're launching in September. We're the broadcast alternative to C-SPAN. And I'm a little confused, I guess because I'm new here. On one hand, I hear the all-above strategy is commonplace among the commissioners. I also hear that there's going to be a 24x increase in demand because of mobile use. I'm real curious, would the FCC accept an experimental license application now from the broadcast community for a broadcast overlay plan which could dramatically decrease the amount of mobile data?
Right. So to take those apart, the reason for the all of the above strategy is that the demand is increasing by that 24x or even larger rate that you mentioned. Congress has directed that we move forward on an incentive auction plan, and we will do so. Broadcasters, of course, and all stakeholders will have an opportunity to comment in those proceedings. And I don't know if it's what you're referring to, but I've heard some interesting discussions going on in the broadcast community on how to participate in those auctions and make it a win-win and move forward as broadcasters on innovative ideas. Of course, broadcasters have been more and more seeing themselves as multi-platform content players. And in fact, they're more and more they're reaching their viewers not only through over-the-air broadcasts and cable and satellite and mobile. And so I one of the things that I hear more and more are broadcasters recognizing the importance of a robust two-way mobile infrastructure. But we'll continue to provide, I expect that we'll be launching proceedings to implement the incentive auction law in the next few months, and that'll be a vehicle to consider all comments, all ideas. All right, everyone, thanks. Good to see you all. Happy summer.
Hi, thanks for staying. I think Neil talked to everybody, and we only had some questions on the broadband presentation, so I'm going to call up those staff members to answer any questions you guys might have on that.
Everyone else is left?
Yes.
Okay.
I added you to our press list, by the way. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
What?
I'm always the only one left.
Hi. Are you Matt Schwartz?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm Mary Beth. Hi. This is
Hi,
Matt Schwartz from ComDaily. Why don't you go ahead and just ask some of your questions, and these guys can...
Well, just a few. Walter Johnston, you said that you were encouraged by the report and in some instances, quote, very surprised. And I was wondering what surprised you.
Well, this was a one-year report, and we didn't really know what to expect. We only had one reference point. We were surprised at 2 points. Okay, one is that the net performance increased quite significantly. And we think that's because you have technologies, for example, such as DOCSIS 3 coming in. Verizon's announced some very high rates, and they're moving up. So the carriers clearly are starting to invest. As new technology is coming in, carriers are starting to invest in their network. We were very pleased, maybe surprised is too strong a term, but pleased to see that upward rise in the tide. The other thing that we were pleasantly surprised by is that the gap, I'll tell you three things. One is the actual performance to advertised performance continued to come together. So consumers are getting a better deal. Last year it was 87%. This year it's 96% of advertised rate during the most congested period on the internet. All right, and we know, looking globally, that's very unique to the United States. And the other thing, if you look at the charts, the performance gaps between carriers are actually narrowing. We think this is the result of competition. So last year, when they were spread out on our first report, we saw that they're coming together to the center. So the quality of the service is going up. The commitment from the service provider to the consumer is getting better enforced. And then the network performance went up 38% in 1 year.
Somebody mentioned that the delivered speeds compared to advertisements are getting better, and that's not because the advertised speeds are getting lower. Could a company reduce their advertised speeds and therefore kind of have a higher result in the tests?
Yes, but by the way, understand when we started the first study, and the chairman commented on this, we wanted transparency. So the argument last year was the carriers should really tell the consumer what they're going to deliver. Now, maybe they couldn't have delivered that, and they should have lowered their expectations. Okay, what we saw this year is that didn't happen. On average, they basically kept the rates, in fact, moved the rates higher on average, and still closed the gap. Okay, so that's a great deal.
There's a lot of data in the report, and I haven't gone through all of it, but does the FCC try to figure out why some of these results came out? For example, latency increased during peak periods by 6.5% compared to last year. Why might that have been?
The real focus of this report is really on the data, getting the data out there, getting the information out there, and the focus is not, we have a few sort of high level discussion in the report itself, but the focus of this report is really on the information, on what's actually going on, and it's really a sort of second step to really start to think about what's driving these factors and to analyze it.
Is that the FCC's role to think about what's driving it, or is it?
Yes, the FCC. The FCC we have other reports on that are on these kinds of issues, and we look at these kinds of issues and look at what's driving changes in the marketplace. This report is really about getting the information out to consumers.
And in addition,
I'm sorry, what was your name?
Daniel Kirshner. Yes.
And since in many cases that's a fairly detective work, what you end up. The big advantage we have is since the data is openly available, people who understand the technology, who can really dig into in depth, the academic and research community, they will have the opportunity to do that kind of detective work to find out why interesting things happen. So we've already seen lots of good publications on the data, and they can do much more than we can, and so we look forward also to the contributions of people outside the Commission to help us, to educate us and others.
One last question. There's been considerable concern in the last couple of days expressed by MLab, New America, and dozens of engineers and leaders in academia who sent a letter to the Commission yesterday strongly objecting to a proposal that's circulating that would replace open MLab measurement servers with closed infrastructure run by the ISPs. They talked of alarm that was felt in the research community, and they said it was a significant shift. This seems to contradict the calls for transparency and openness by you and the commissioners. So what can you tell me about this proposal, and is the FCC considering moving towards a more closed testing infrastructure?
Just stated very clearly, that statement is false. We're not considering a replacement of a measurement lab infrastructure. We have enjoyed working with them and be a key component of our measurements here. We strive, as these measurements become important to a very large community, both in terms of research, public interest, as well as consumers. Our goal is to make the measurements as open and as reliable as possible. So the discussions that have taken place are to make sure that as these measurements become such a key component of our policy making, that we can validate measurements that is part of the scientific rigor that the chairman mentioned earlier in his remarks. And as part of that, there have been discussions to enhance but not replace the existing infrastructure. In general, discussions about the infrastructure are made as part of the measurement collaborative. That is a set of people that includes the public interest community, the research community, the ISPs, and obviously FCC staff. And as part of that collaborative, we discuss how to improve the data gathering. We learn from issues that we discover during measurements, and we together, collaboratively, in a spirit of open collaboration, decide how we can improve that. But again, emphatically, there is no intent to replace the infrastructure. There is a continuing desire to enhance the measurement capability that we do have.
Now, you said there's no intent to replace, but a proposal I'm looking at would take, for the off-net section of the measuring, you could have either the best research platform server, which would be MLab, or another server, or the best public ISP-provided server from a different ISP. So isn't that, in a way, kind of pushing MLab away from the forefront?
No, I mean, there is no forefront as such here. I mean, we gather data, the more the merrier. And so the idea is to allow us, if we proceed in some manner of a combined enhanced infrastructure, to have more servers so that it becomes easier to detect anomalies, for example, of the kinds that you hinted at, to make sure that the data that we have we can trust. It is often very difficult to determine when when things happen, things don't smoke. They just kind of data looks a little funny. And so having more data from different sources that are independent is helpful. But we want to maintain the key component of all of it is that whatever data gathering infrastructure we have has to be openly documented, open topology, clear processes, and a common understanding of that. And even today, parts of the MLab infrastructure are provided by third parties. They're not all provided by one entity. And so the important part is not necessarily who provides it, but that there is clear and open communication, clear and open structure definition, clear and open measurement protocol that we can all agree on, and that we can have multiple sources of data in that. But again, the important part of the MLab infrastructure will remain as a key component in that. But as important is to make sure that we maintain the openness and that everybody can validate and verify the information that we have. And that includes the research community, the ISPs that obviously depend on it very strongly in their engineering and advertising, as well as third parties who are not directly part of it.
So this proposal that's circulating, when are you going to decide whether to accept the proposal? How does that work?
That's going to be taking place over the next few months.
Okay.
Within the collaborative. Go. So that's like I said, this is a collaborative process. There is no voting or anything like that. There is a process where we're striving for consensus among all the parties in that, and that includes clearly the measurement labs groups as one key component to make sure that we reach consensus on what is best for what I think is the common goal, namely open data, open processes, reliable and scientific rigor.
Let me just add one simple statement. We're not replacing. The plan is not to replace anything, but to add to. And in adding to, we hope to increase our ability to efficiently and reliably collect data. So we've had discussions. By the way, these have all been open discussions on this subject, and we bring them back to the discussions, and we'll make a joint decision. But it's done in a fairly well-documented collaborative process.
That's been one of the hallmarks of that process, is that it is, again, noting that this is clearly a measurement process where parties have interests that may not be convergent always, and not so the process is important.
I guess just one final question. If this proposal is accepted and private ISP servers are used to assist with this data collection, would the FCC make sure that data from the private ISP servers is made public?
Yes. We would not, we are not, ISPs can do whatever private data collection they want for their own purposes. We're obviously not interfering with that. But as part of a Measurement Broadband America initiative, one of the foundational characteristics of it is open access to the data. In all cases, the data is made available. The scripts and other data that is necessary to interpret the data are made available, and it is clear who gathered the data. So that also would, if there was somebody wanted to install servers that somehow made them look better, it would become fairly obvious because all the data is clear who gathered the data, when was it gathered, under what circumstances.
All right. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks.